across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome. Ian in for Jezza for the next couple of weeks. It's Monday, the 3rd of August, which means, of course, it's nearly Christmas. I'll tell you the supermarket story in just a sec. And it's going to be hot again as well. Welcome along. We are absolutely rammed at this. And as I mentioned just before the news there, the news that broke yesterday, Rupert Lowe holding out an olive branch to Nigel Farage. Let's partner up and get this thing done. Now, this is a bit of a double-edged sword. I've got the response from Nigel. We'll bring you that in just a moment. But if you're a Reform voter, how are you feeling about this? Remember, there was a spectacular fallout between these two men. Thoughts on that? And if you vote Restore, are you all up for a bit of this? We'll speak to both supporters of both parties throughout the course of the show. Yesterday, Andy Burnham broke cover, finally decided to talk about immigration. In fact, he didn't just discuss it, he actually went to Dover. What a good bloke. Down at the coalface of the problem, he has pledged, quote, that his government will be relentless in curbing the number of people arriving in the UK on small boats. Are you buying this? Can Labour solve the migration crisis? Elsewhere, more than 1,500 convicted foreign criminals are living in taxpayer-funded asylum accommodation because they've not been deported. How did we get here, for goodness sake? Is there any end to this insanity? Also, Britain could face food shortages if the drought continues. Is there a bit of scaremongering here? How bad is it? Is Bob Geldof about to release an inevitable song because of it? We'll also talk bad seaside results, got loads on that. And what about this? 1 in 10 Brits haven't taken a bath in more than a decade, according to research. Do people just prefer a shower, or are we living with an unhealthy contingent of utter smell bags? Details to come. 0344 499 1000. I giggle early doors because Charlie Rowley is in the studio.
Speaking of smell bags, I thought you were going to introduce me as. I thought, here we go.
Speaking of which, Rowley's in the house. Get your pegs out, everybody. Oh, Rowley's in. Are you a bath man or a shower man?
I am a shower man.
I'm a shower man. I would get rid of the bath, to be honest. A waste of space in the bathroom.
Yes, I used to have a bath quite a lot when I was a kid, and I used to quite enjoy it. But,
it was great. Did you ever get in there with matey?
Beg pardon?
You know, the bubble bath.
Oh, I see. I thought, well, they were the sailors, were they? The sailors?
Yes.
The bottles of,
yes,
of sort of bubbles, yes.
You're making this so much worse. Yeah. You're writing this for me, Charlie.
I remember it well.
He's 2 steps ahead. Yeah, I mean, the bath as a kid was kind of good fun. But as an adult, honestly, I think I'm one of these... 1 in 10 Brits have never had a bath in 10 years.
It's a time thing, isn't it? The waiting for the bath to fill up, I think.
Waiting for it to fill up, and then you do that, you put your toe in, it's always too hot, got to put a bit more cold in, put too much cold in, put a bit more, and then it's bigger than you wanted it to be, and then by the time you get in there, of course, physics takes over, and, you know, you just think, this is, and how long am I going to lay in here for?
Well, yes. You
know, people talk about lighting a candle, and... you know, turning the lights out and relax. I get the picture. Yeah. I haven't got time for that.
Who's got time for that these days?
Unbelievable.
Just get your head under the shower.
Just get your head under the shower, more refreshing, and the way to go. Wakes you up for the morning. I'm all for a cold shower, by the way.
Are you?
Depends on the circumstances. If I've been in... I don't know if you've ever visited a sauna, but... Chapter 2. But I love a sauna. So in the gym I go to, because obviously you don't end up looking like this by just laying on your backside. So you can go for a swim, and then right by the pool there's a sauna and a steam room. You can do all of that and then jump into a cold shower. It makes sense there.
Yes.
Waking up in the morning in a cold shower No.
No, I mean, waking up early is stressful enough as it is, I think. Then having to have a cold shower, which just, I think... But apparently it's quite good, you know, for you.
Yes, once you've got through it, it pays, it pays dividends.
It's the kind of people that go swimming in the morning, but they go in the sort of natural water where it's absolutely freezing. You know, it's supposed to sort of cleanse, I think, your body.
What is that about?
Open water swimming.
I went... So we both... Because I do want to just touch on this, bad seaside resorts in the UK. Because seasides are... Again, it's that double-edged sword phrase, really, because a seaside... Notionally, the idea of a seaside is quite nice. I lived in Blackpool for a while before it sort of took a bit of a downward turn. And it was, you know...
Since you left, I heard.
Yes, as I left. Carnage behind me. There was... I mean, as a kid, Blackpool was like Premier League. When you thought of seaside resort, you thought of Blackpool. It had the lights, it had the pleasure beach, it had big stars performing at all of those piers, those theatres. Everything about it was exciting. And it's taken a real hit. Economically, it's taken a terrible hit, and I don't know why, given what's there. It's got a football club, it's got the golf down there at St Anne's, which is, you know, world famous. It's got everything that should tick every box for success. But it's taken a turn, and I just think when a town takes a turn, against the backdrop of it being a seaside resort, it's so much worse for some reason, because it's meant to be fun. It's sort of the image of the clown and the laughing policeman against the backdrop of carnage. It just looks a bit haunting. Now, we both went to the beach at the weekend.
We did.
Different beaches, slightly different experiences. So you ended up in Brighton, and I ended up on the Isle of Sheppey. Now, I don't know if you... The only reason we went to the Isle of Sheppey is because it was my little boy's birthday, got a little metal detector, one of those kids' ones, and we just Googled nearest sandy beach, because you don't want to take a kid with a metal detector to a beach and it's full of rocks.
Well, no, that would be...
Not unless you've also bought him a JCB.
Yes, yeah.
It's just going to be useless, isn't it, really? Right, OK. You've got a bleep on your machine, whack up the steamroller, you know, or whatever. So we ended up on the Isle of Sheppey. Now, I know the Isle of Sheppey reasonably well because, you know, growing up in Kent, working initially in local radio, we would do sort of events there and stuff like that. Being there a couple of times, I mean, if any place needed a lick of paint, it's the Isle of Sheppey.
Right.
And I don't know what it is. It's kind of like when Benidorm met The Hills Have Eyes.
Oh.
If I had to describe it as an experience.
OK. I know Benidorm pretty well.
Yeah, well, The Hills Have Eyes. Just think of... I don't even know how to begin to describe it. Sort of vague human dysfunctionality, I suppose, would be one way of looking at it. There's a lot of badly spelt tattoos. There's a lot of silicone-injected lips that look as if someone's been attacked by an industrial vacuum cleaner. There's a lot of that going on. Disproportionate number of people in mobility scooters smoking a Rothmans.
Oh.
And a disproportionate amount of kids called Chardonnay. I don't know why this is. I mean, it just... And I swear, two things happened. I swear I saw a man with an eye on his palm. I might be wrong. I just thought, has that bloke... I think he's got an eye on his palm.
There must be a phrase, you know, his eye...
There's a lot of phrases.
Eyes in the beauty of the beholder or something, you know.
And amusement arcades that go on into several postcodes when you go in one. You go in, it's like the Hotel California. You go into one of those things, you can never leave. I'm telling you, they just go on for miles and miles. The lights, the sounds. Now, as a kid, I'd have loved that. As an adult, it's just all shades of insanity. And I saw a woman there, and she had like a lot of sort of back to the tattoo thing. But the big I would have said she was about 27.
OK.
30 max. And she had Nan written right across the top. And I thought, that's obviously a tribute to her Nan. Sometimes people put the date, you know, born, died, that kind of thing. And about 2 minutes later, a load of kids come running up to her, going, Nan, Nan. No, she was the Nan.
Oh, gosh.
She was about 30 years younger than me.
Well...
It was a shocking scene.
Yes.
Go on.
Did she have the dates, or what
She had no dates. She was just identifying
Nan.
herself, really.
I
It's
see.
like, I'm the Nan.
A reminder to herself.
I'm the Nan, yeah. And I don't know if you're allowed to vape inside an amusement arcade. I don't know, but she was vaping away. It was just... It needs a lick of paint. And it's really quite... I mean, Danny Dyer's got a little caravan set up down there, apparently. Yeah. So all the greats are going down.
Well, yes, and you.
And me.
Yourself.
And me. You know, when you look at something and you feel quite... My mother, well, my other half's mum, so not officially mother-in-law, but she used to go there. So she's from East London. She used to go down there as a kid, and it was the place to go. A lot of people from East London and Essex would choose the Isle of Sheppey as the go-to place. It's the nearest sort of seaside resort, if you like. If you come over the crossing, over the Dartford crossing, or in from East London, that's the first place you'd come to that's seasidey. And I don't know about you, but when I go somewhere like that, I'm redesigning it in my head. I'm penning letters to the council. Go, if only... So many places, literally... We always use that phrase, it needs a lick of paint. Some places literally just need a lick of paint. And you wonder about local councils, and you think, what is it about... Great example, OK? Sorry, this is down in London as well, if you're not in London. You've got King's Road in West London. Beautiful, all these lovely townhouses and little boutique businesses. And, they, you know, they're painted different colours. There's a purple one, there's a red one, there's a... And then you've got... Well, I did a thing for ITV on this years ago. And then on in East London, you've got Whitechapel Road. Now, essentially, same age of buildings, same types of buildings. One is gorgeous, one's a hellhole. And you just think, really? How is that? Why does that look like that? And the answer, lick of paint.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, possibly.
And when you know, they charge you enough business rates for businesses. So you walk down Whitechapel Road and you'd think if you run the business, because there's often, there's a lot of takeaways down there. So you go there, there's a chicken shop or a curry shop, whatever. And then, mysteriously, above it is a dentist. And you think, is there not a clash there when you're in the chair? All you can smell, you're having your molars sorted, and all you can smell is a tasty vindaloo. Why does the council not say, if you own this building, you've got to paint it? You can't just put whatever windows in you like. You couldn't just put an extension on it. You couldn't put an offensive political message. But you don't have to paint it. It can look as shocking as you like.
Yeah, you would have thought that could be part of the agreement, the tenancy agreement, I suppose.
Paint it!
To paint it. Yeah, keep it up to date.
Get a paintbrush out, man. Paint it.
And it doesn't cost that much to paint, I don't think, a building, or certainly the frontage of a building anyway. I mean, I've had a bit of painting in my flat, which,
my mate, Fingers McGrath, from Bethnal Green, he'll get you as much Dulax as you like.
Well,
I mean, it says.
now we know.
I said Dulax. It says Dulax on the whether it is, I don't know. But the point is white and it's in a tin. So it doesn't take much to paint the place. So. Seaside resort. Margate's a good example that's been a bit more up and coming. You went down to Brighton. What was going on in Brighton?
Well, it was Pride this weekend in Brighton.
I was there.
And I had a few friends down there, so I thought I'd worked quite late on Friday into Saturday, so I didn't get down there for the whole parade or anything like that. I just thought I'd pop down for the afternoon, got there about 3 o'clock, and it was beautiful weather, lots of music acts going on across the beachfront. That was a really nice beachfront, actually. That was buzzing. It was loads of families there, lots of people from all over, just to come and have a good Saturday afternoon knees up, really. Which I thought that's what it's all about.
See, Brighton has taken a bit of a Premier League position, hasn't it, in the seaside resorts. Margate is a bit up and coming. Went down to Folkestone a couple of months ago now. That again still needs a bit of a lick of paint, but it's moving, it's improving.
But I'm sad about Blackpool. You're right, because I went to Blackpool. I went to Blackpool a few times when I was working in government, all part of the levelling up agenda. So a place
sent Rowley to Blackpool.
I know. So it's all my fault.
What can go wrong?
What could go wrong? And I was asked to basically find a few venues that we might do things in, speeches or whatever. And so went to the Winter Gardens, went to Blackwall Tower, went to all the the key places, and there wasn't, and this was a Friday afternoon, not a soul to be seen. And I thought, right, well, I did all my work basically in a couple of hours. I thought, right, well, I'll get an early train. I wasn't booked, I don't know, the train I was booked on was about 6 o'clock, but I finished about 2:30, I think. And I thought, right, well, I'll just make my way to the station. And I thought, I've got a bit of time for maybe a bit of refreshment before I head through. But I thought there were these two blokes, or it might have been Nan, actually, outside the pub. And I thought, I'm in my suit, they're not. Put it that way. And I thought,
look at this lovely man coming towards us.
Yeah.
Oh, I love you, big southern love muffin.
I knew we'd met before. Thought I recognised you. But I thought...
Have you got a light, love?
But I thought to myself, no, that's not really... I'll give that a miss. It's clearly a local. And I got to the station and I thought, because it was just by the station, so people can probably work out where it is. And I thought, no, actually, Charlie, you go in, you're allowed to go in to get some refreshment before you head home. And I did. And it's 2:30 in the afternoon on a Friday afternoon, all of Blackpool was in this pub. And it was brilliant. I think I missed my train. I missed the train that I was booked on.
You didn't come back for a week?
There was cabaret, there was, singing karaoke, it was all kinds of things going on. But there were families, all families sort of in there, from your nans to your kids. And I just thought, wow, this is a brilliant afternoon. No wonder Blackpool was so empty. They're all there. But you want the whole of Blackpool to be used. You want the seafront to return to what it used to be like.
It used to be so... I don't know what kind of acts they have on at the big theatres, but it would always be the sort of, Cannon and Ball and, those big sort of, Lulu supporting or something. It would be... for that genre, as big as you could get, and every venue was a banger. There was all big names appearing in all these places, the Russ Abbotts and the goodness knows who else, and it was just massive. And I couldn't believe I was working and living in Blackpool when I was up there. So the fact that it took a turn, I'm pleased to hear your experience though. That you had a positive time.
I did on that occasion. I mean, there is a lot of work that needs to go on in Blackpool because there's, I think a lot of poverty and a lot of social deprivation for probably for the reasons that you said. When the seaside sort of town, wherever it is, sort of collapses, when that economy goes, then there hasn't been anything that really sort of replaced it, which is a shame.
When you go past the summer season. And summer seasons are tricky now in those places. People are more discerning. It's easier to nip off to Malaga or something. It's sometimes cheaper as well. But so much of those towns are dependent on the summer. So the summers have got quieter, and the winters, which were always quiet anyway, suddenly... they're ghost towns half the time because the illuminations in Blackpool don't happen in the summer season. They happen just sort of after that. And they're amazing, this whole parade of lights. It takes you right down from sort of North Shore down to the Pleasure Beach, and it's great to see. But when those lights turn off and the candle is blown out, those two women are still sat there in that pub going, where's that posh southern lad? Is he coming back? Margaret, have you seen it? I think his name was Charlie. Don't shout that too loud round here. You don't know who'll turn up.
Yes, I'm the only Charlie you need.
Leslie says, good morning, Ian and Charlie. Perhaps that lady's name was Nan, short for Nanette or something, and she had it tattooed in case she forgot who she was. Have a great day. Keep cool. Charlie is always on when there's a heat wave, says Leslie. That's true. There's another one today. I think it's going to be about 33 today.
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, and it's quite hot in here at the minute, isn't it, in the studio? But that might be something to do with the weather as well. But yeah. another hot day, which I'm looking forward to, actually. As you can tell, I mean, I can't get enough of the sun. So, I'm sure I'll be out in it.
Absolutely. Do you not tan?
I don't. I don't know what it is. I could put on any kind of lotion or, potion of protection. I will always appear as a salmon pink from the neck down.
Sort of Casper-esque.
I am, yes.
Keith in Nottingham makes a really good point. Back in the 70s, only posh people had a shower. This is absolutely true. Sunday was always bath night, bang on, but money was tight. But part of the big family taking turns using the same water wasn't fun, particularly if you were last. Yes, if there was a family of 6 and you were the last one in, then, yeah, I can see the shortcomings of that.
Yes,
we didn't have a shower at all. We just had a bath. And when my dad announced, I don't know where somebody said, oh, you know, because he worked on building sites, because he was a painter and decorator. So he must have known somebody. So, oh, you should have a shower fitted. When he came home with a shower, I mean, it was such big... He might as well have come home with a nuclear reactor. I mean, it was such big news in the house. It's like, wow, Dad's got a shower. Are we having that? And it wasn't the best shower, because it started off with one of those that you get from Kay's catalogue, which was just a sort of rubber tube. That was the only version of a shower, and you shoved the things up the plug, up the taps. You know, just put like you do with a hose pipe.
Right, yes.
And it was just a shower head on a rubber piece of hose.
And you had to handhold.
Absolutely rubbish.
Handhold?
Yeah, you handheld it, yeah. Yeah, there might have been some kind of suction device you could have attached to a tile. I don't know. So, yes, thoughts on that. Why is it that 1 in 10 Brits haven't taken a bath in more than a decade? Is this because we just prefer showers, or are people just a little bit on the nose these days? And, of course, we're talking... Just before we pause, can we just play this Rupert Lowe clip? I think we should, because this is a massive story. If you're interested in politics, if you are fed up with the status quo, then this story would have interested you, whether you vote for either of these parties or not. But, of course, Restore only came around because there was a fallout between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage. He started up something that wasn't a party to start with, became a party. They're making inroads. I think they got about, what, sort of 8% or something at the Manchester mayoral elections, which are a party that didn't exist literally 2 minutes ago, is quite something. Reform came second. Rupert Lowe, almost out of nowhere, has issued a kind of a message to Nigel Farage. Have a listen.
So, Nigel, my message is simple. If you are prepared to work together around serious policies, serious reform, and serious government, then so are we. Not because it's politically convenient for Restore Britain, not because it's personally easy, but millions and millions of British people deserve a patriotic government that puts our national interest before any personal differences that you and I may have.
2 points on this, firstly. Where was the bloke playing the piano?
Exactly.
Widen the shot, let him have some glory. You know, for goodness sake. I think that's Rupert's personal pianist. And that lamp behind him, if you were watching this in vision, you just know costs more than the average house on the Isle of Sheppey. So there is that. Separate to all of that. What are we making of this? Because this is big news.
It is, and it seems to have come from, as you say, absolutely really nowhere, because as far as we're all aware, Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage have had still this big falling out. Up until last week, Restore Britain were fielding, as you say, a candidate in the Manchester mayoral election, which Reform came second in, but, you know, significantly behind Labour.
I think Restore beat the Lib Dems.
They beat the Tories as well, Restore Britain. So there is a vote out there.
Yes.
And it might be a significant enough vote in certain constituencies at a general election to split a right-wing vote. If you had, for example, Restore Britain, Reform UK, the Conservatives, for example, people not quite sure which one of those to go for, and you split the vote and let in maybe a Labour candidate or a Lib Dem candidate or whatever it is. So if it is about uniting the right, then obviously it's something that I think people should take seriously. But I think people will find the timing slightly odd. I mean, what has happened in the last 24, 48 hours? I mean, this has obviously been thought up before then. But why now has Rupert Lowe decided, right, after all of the, slaggings off of each other, the public spat that they've had, as Rupert decided that now's the time actually to say, no, I can work with Nigel, here's an olive branch, but here are a few conditions which I think some of them are just going to be a non-starter. But Rupert must know that as well. I don't think you can legitimately turn around to Nigel Farage and say, right, we're happy to work with you, but you must get rid of, Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman just because they were Tories previously. I just don't see how that works.
Is he asking for that?
Yeah, so he's set down a few conditions, which is one, to sort of not have any more Tories, or to get rid of the Tories, or they can't sit as part of what could be a Restore Britain, Reform UK cabinet, if that ever came to pass. They want a referendum on the death penalty, so they obviously want to bring that back. They want to ban the burqa. That has to be something that the Reform would sign up to. And I think there's one other. That might be it. But I think some of those could work. I think you could legitimately ban face coverings. Sarah Pochin, a Reform UK MP, called in the House of Commons to ban the burqa. So I'm not entirely sure the public want a referendum on the death penalty. I'm not quite sure where they're at this stage. I know there's a lot of strength of feeling against some of the criminals that we have in our country, where people might want to see the death penalty returned. That's, I think, just a discussion for politicians.
But the reality is, if you look at Manchester, which a right-wing party invariably over the years would never get a look in. I mean, the Conservatives... It's interesting when you look at the previous mayoral election that there was, or the first mayoral election in Greater Manchester, it really was just Lib Dems, Tory, Labour, like anywhere else. And now that's sort of expanded. You've got the Green Party, then you've got Reform and Restore. So if you look at Restore in that particular seat, 46,000, I'm rounding these figures off, and Reform 112,000. So between the two of them, you've got 160,000, 170,000 people voting. Labour, 251,000. They were always going to win it. But it's close. It's more than half of the people that voted in the Greater Manchester mayoral elections, more than half voted for right-wing parties. If you factor the Conservatives in as well, then you've got 2/3 voted for right-wing parties. But, of course, it's the first past the post and all the rest of it, more or less. So it doesn't work out. So the appetite has completely changed, and the Conservatives are nowhere in these kind of pictures. There are strongholds where the Tories will always hang on.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, you know, that 170-odd thousand, if that was sort of distributed amongst constituencies within Greater Manchester, for example, so it could only be, 2,000 or 3,000 votes that you might need just to swing a constituency one way or another.
Thoughts on this? 0344 499 1000. Should there be a pact between Reform UK and Restore Britain? I'm really keen to hear from you if you are a supporter of one of those two parties and think absolutely not, there should not be a pact. Thoughts on that? On this very point, let's get a voice note from Jimmy. Morning, Jimmy.
Morning, Ian. It's Jimmy from Halifax, on his way to Nottingham with a delivery. Rupert, Nigel, come on, let's be adult about this. You need to get together. All the right need to stick together. We need to get Labour out.
$49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
What I absolutely love about working here at Talk, and it's always very pronounced on the breakfast show as well, we do this on afternoons normally, is the kind of gear change between the absolute serious, reading the pulse of the nation, reflecting views on the nation, like the inevitability of a very, very curious and colourful 2029 general election, the whole reform restore. We have all of that, and then we also end up talking about seaside resorts and baths, which is lovely. Let's get a voice note on baths from Helen.
Morning, guys. Helen in Knutsford. Well, I've lived in Knutsford for just over a year. And when I lived in Didsbury, I had a bathroom, a big bathroom with a bath, and I didn't have a shower. And I used to really want a shower, but I couldn't stand having a bath. I thought it was such a drag because I'd been living there for so long. And now I've moved to Knutsford, I've only got a shower, no bath. And I would love to have a bath. I would absolutely love to have a bath now. So I think maybe people just don't have baths anymore. I don't care about waiting for the water to heat up and stuff. I love bath bombs and all of the shower gels and all of the smelly stuff, but you can just relax in a bath. You can't relax in a shower, can you? Enough said.
Sounds like you need some kind of parlour, to be honest, Helen. I think that's what you're looking for, frankly. That's the Didsbury-Knutsford divide. Well, there you go. In a nutshell, isn't it, really? From Helen. Yeah. You can't please Helen, can you? I had a shower, then I had a bath, and now I miss a bath. It's like, oh, Helen, just have a shower and enjoy.
Yes, yeah, I think so. But I can understand the bath bombs. Not that I've had one for a while, because I do like, if I am at a sauna, if I'm at a a gym or whatever that has, or a hotel that's got a pool, yes. I will jump in the jacuzzi. I like a jacuzzi. I really do. I think that is quite sort of therapeutic.
Jacuzzis are OK. A friend of mine in the same gym I mentioned, he was in one the other, and there was despite they've got little signs saying no mobile phones in here, there was a woman with a phone, and again, this is kind of interesting, but now we take it for granted. The selfie, OK. I've got a problem with the selfie generally. If you went back 15 years ago, and you saw somebody taking a photo of their own face, you'd ring a medic. You'd say, I don't know what's happened to Jim in the office. He's taking a picture of his own face. He can't stop himself. Not one, loads. Just the same picture. Keeps doing it. You'd ring someone, you'd go, there's something wrong with him. Yes. Derek needs a doctor. He's taking pictures of his own face. Why is he doing this? Now, of course, it's become perfectly normal. And this woman was doing this in the, she was holding it high. She's laid in the jacuzzi and she's sort of doing a bit of a, not quite a panoramic, moving her arm around with the phone. And my mate said, could you not use your phone, please? And she said, I'm working. And she's obviously not working. She's obviously an influencer. So, and if you're an influencer, then you need a phone, don't you?
Yes, a content creator.
Yes, that's what she was doing. She was creating content via the conduit of a jacuzzi, which is interesting.
See, no, I'm not down for that.
But she couldn't get her head around the idea that... I mean, the idea that she looked like a weirdo didn't even enter her head. That wasn't even a problem. Her problem was that anybody would comment on this.
Yeah.
And, he's trying to explain that, there's people, kind of in their half-dressed. They're in trunks and bikinis. They don't want somebody with a camera, even if she made the point. I'm not filming anyone else, and that's not the point.
But exactly, and that's for me the whole sort of social media, content creation, influence. People that claim to be these people that they can't, influence anybody. As far as I can see, there's no care for other people. It's all about their content, what they can post online, what might get them likes, retweets, whatever. But the idea of privacy for other people is completely out the window. I mean, you can literally be walking down the street and someone will now try and film you, and you just think, I'm not.
What's all that about?
Yes, yeah.
Well, the woman in the jacuzzi, it turns out, got arrested for voyeurism. It was actually a bloke called Kenneth from Dartford, just doing the old blonde wig thing. Fall for that one, Kenny. Rachel says, good morning, Charlie and Ian. I can't quite make out what Rupert Lowe is up to. I do agree that the right need to unite, but he must realise laying down conditions for Nigel is a non-starter. Now, of course, the contingent that, like Restore, have spent, not necessarily Rupert Lowe, but lots of the supporters, when we've talked about it, pathologically hate reform. More than, I think, reform hate restore in terms of supporters. They essentially call reform the new Conservative Party. They're no different. They're a mainstream party. Only Rupert is speaking the language of... It's a far more animated cohort over there at Restore than Reform, some would argue. So for many, to get into bed, so if you bring in, you know, we know that Reform refused to even talk about or acknowledge Tommy Robinson and his kind of support base. But that's the Restore support base. So there's the risk for Nigel Farage.
Absolutely. And look, I don't want to make light of it, but the only example I can try and think of is when there's sort of, two of your friends who, might have sort of been together or, you were a couple who've separated, then your friends... but you've got mutual friends, and you take a side as to what sort of, one of the two that you prefer, whether it's, whatever partner it is.
Yeah.
And then you've seen a lot of animosity between the two. You've seen text messages flying. You've seen the calls. You've seen how terrible their relationships have been. And then all of a sudden, the couple decide to get back together. Now that leaves the friends who have pitched aside one way or another in a slightly sort of precarious position, because they've then automatically then got to be nice to someone that they have on behalf of their friend, of one of the partners, that they've absolutely hated. So now the idea that, OK, Nigel and Rupert have had this massive public spat, and which
involved the police and all sorts of things.
And that's the telling thing. I mean, why on earth Rupert Lowe is now saying, I'll do a deal with Nigel, we can put all of our differences aside, but you can't have people like Robert Jenrick and Suella because they're former Conservatives. Not one mention about Zia Youssef, who was who Rupert accused of the one calling the police or making the allegations in the first place, which, blew up the whole relationship. So... that's an interesting side. But the public, I think, on the supporters of both Reform and Restore would have to be a little bit cautious if they're thinking, right, well, hold on, Nigel and Rupert, they've had this big old public spat. They've said they'll never do. Now, all of a sudden, seemingly out of the blue, that there's an offer on the table, I think people will tread a little bit. But they've got to do... What these two have got to do, which I think they're all still sort of learning about, is the politics. They're two businessmen, and Nigel's been in politics a lot longer than Rupert, and so he's better at it as a communicator, and that's why he's been able to lead, I think, a few parties and get them to where they have been in the polls of recent months. But they've got to put aside their businessman, CEO kind of egos where they're sort of singing mud at each other. They've got to be politicians and bring the public with them as much as anything else.
Well, this one from Steve, who says, Ian and Charlie, in my opinion, Rupert lists of demands has been designed to try and hurt Nigel. Where are the concessions of Restore? As the minor party, they should be saying they are prepared to surrender. As for the timing, why now, says Steve? It's a very good point. I mean, whilst Restore have really kind of poked up in and spiked in the opinion polls and sort of appeared not completely out of nowhere, but kind of, and making inroads in, whether it was, Makerfield, they got it wasn't decisive in stopping Reform, but it was there. Greater Manchester, it's there. You're still talking about 47,000 people who voted for Restore, more than the Lib Dems, not quite as many as the Green Party, which is extraordinary to me, but that's another story. But they're demonstrably the smaller party by far. Then that would require concession. I don't think you can call the shots if you are the smaller party. It's just the way it goes, isn't it?
You're absolutely right.
Back onto the issue of showers and things. And this, frankly, I've now got post-traumatic stress disorder from what I'm about to read here. Because Fafa says, Ian and Charlie, the shower and the rubber hose pipe takes me back to the twin tub washing machine. Half the time, when emptying the water, inevitably more ended up on the floor than down the sink. What a palaver, but they were great. Now, my mum had a twin tub, and it did involve sort of putting the hose in the tap. My mum also did this on a Sunday morning for reasons I've never been able to work out. She decided to do the washing, some baking. I don't know why my mum loathed cooking, and she wasn't very good at it. I mean, it was just not she would admit to that. So she would be making a Sunday roast, doing the washing, and doing some bake, all simultaneously. I would wake up as a kid, you'd open the kitchen door, it was like flipping Hiroshima in there. I'm not kidding you. It was a horror show. There was steam everywhere. As the steam parted, I could just about see my mum with a pair of oven gloves on and, you know, a pile of washing under one arm and some pastry in the other one and a chicken in the flipping oven. I didn't know whether I could smell suds or potatoes. It was horrific. And there was always a really naff sort of Radio 2 show playing on the radio. Some songs from the shows or something, you know. What good is sitting alone in a room? That's all this is going on. It's like there's the baking and the pastry. Yet I'm just doing this, and the back door was open because the steam was there. It was awful.
Oh.
Because only when I look back at it, I think my mum was on the spectrum. And I say this kindly. She really was. I mean, I don't know why she opted to do 3 quite big things simultaneously on a Sunday morning.
Well, mums can't they, I suppose?
Well, no, my mum couldn't. That was the problem.
I'm trying to be helpful.
Yes, I know, yeah. If she could, I'd have been right behind her. Go on, Margaret, you can do it. But it was all over the show.
Well, they do have a sort of superpower, I suppose, at times to be able to attempt those things, even if if you couldn't tell the difference between suds or spuds in that kitchen, then but
what she could do, I mean, in later life, she couldn't work a remote control. You get her to, she could work a remote control to turn it on and off and get from BBC One to Channel 4. But the minute you asked her to record a programme on Sky, which means going into a whole kind of interface, she couldn't do this. And it didn't matter how many times I told her. And it was really simple. It was sort of 3 buttons to get to it. But simultaneously, back to the kitchen, she could assemble a food mixer that would rival something you asked the Royal Engineers to construct. You know, when they're putting a cannon together. You know, she could do it like this thing had so many components to it. It was ridiculous. She could do it blindfold.
Yes, yeah, well...
How could she do that and not the remote control? I could never work this out. Mum, how can you do that but not that? This is irrational.
I still can't get it. What is a twin tub?
A twin tub, one was, I think, a spinner. One washed and one span, I think I'm right in saying.
I'm sure.
You can get them on eBay, Charlie, if you're that interested.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was kind of 2 hatches on the top.
I'm sure I met them in Brighton.
I think you probably did, yes. And the rooms were quite similar to the kitchen as well, that I just described. Not as dark, but you take the point. The twin tub thing, I suppose it was at the same time people started to get automatic washing machines, you know, which is the ones we all use now. But prior to that, the twin tub was a sort of the thing to have.
Oh, right. Well.
But we were always very behind the curve, you know, very behind the curve. You know, well, it took us ages to get a microwave oven. And when we did, I thought it was a new TV. When it came out the box, I thought we got a colour telly finally. No, it was a microwave oven. We're going to tell we're pausing here, Christian. Is that what I think we are? 0344 499 1000. This one in from from Ian. Good morning, Ian. Damon from Wigan. I apologise. I hadn't had a bath for 12 years or a shower. However, my wife is fantastic at chasing me with a jet wash once a week. I like that idea.
Well, if there's a hosepipe ban, I mean, you know, which there is in some places, I think, still, you know... Well,
quite a lot of places, yes. You can't jet wash anything.
No.
Have you ever done the jet washing?
I've done a power wash, yes. Is that the same thing?
The thing you do your paving slabs with?
Yes.
Because you know it's good for one slab, isn't it? You're quite excited. Before pre-slab, you're excited. You go, oh, this is great. I'm going to jet wash that, mama. I'm going to get that thing out. It's going to be fantastic. You watch the old moss come off, and then you think, I've just got another 126 to do. And then, for some reason, only blokes do this. Only blokes do this. They go... Shall I just put my hand in front of it just to see what it feels? It takes the skin off. Yeah, and almost the entire finger. Yes, that's what happened last time you tried it. I'll just do it again. I'll jet wash my wellies as I go as well. That's always a nice moment.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. A brief pause. We are back with more. Charlie Rowley is with us. Let's get a voice note. This is on the Reform Pact with Restore. Are you having any of that? Here's a note from Hev. Morning, Hev.
Good morning, gentlemen. This is Hev from Kent. Yeah, all this Rupert Lowe stuff. I mean, I heard somewhere on one of your programmes on Talk weeks ago that they already had some kind of communication in Westminster. So I don't see what all this is about, unless it's Rupert just trying to look good. And if Nigel turns him down, then it looks like Nigel's the bad guy. I mean, I really don't know, but I wouldn't be at all surprised. And I can't see it working. I can't see Nigel putting up with Rupert. Rupert absolutely hates Nigel.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Yes, it is Talk Breakfast. Ian Collins in for Jezza for the next couple of weeks. Charlie Rowley is still with us. Neil says Reform supporters using the same argument as Conservatives once did against them. Stand aside. We're the bigger party. Hypocrisy. Well, Nigel's statement, excuse me, it says... it's quite a long statement. I'll just deliver this salient bit, Charlie. He says to deliver that... he talks about patriotic voters believe in many of the same things, but only one party truly has the possibility of delivering change, he says. To deliver that change, I understand Reform UK will need the support of people from other parties, as well as millions who've never voted before. That is the broad coalition I am building. Now... there's a lot dependent on this. What's fascinating is the complete erosion, not necessarily when it comes to an election, but the complete erosion of the Conservatives in this debate. No one's really talking about, you know, can the Conservatives get better? The Conservatives still have the infrastructure, the apparatus. They've got quite a lot of the big players. You know, Kemi Badenoch has undoubtedly changed the sort of flavour of conservatism that the party perhaps once was. I was listening to a documentary a little earlier about David Cameron getting the job in 2005 and the election, the race between him and David Davis to become the leader. And it was interesting just listening to that and how kind of... how polite and how tame the terms of engagement were. And it was just, there was nothing particularly controversial. There was no, I mean, UKIP, I think, were doing the rounds back then, but they weren't significant in any meaningful way. It was just the Conservatives. And then sort of out of nowhere almost, you know, in the grander scale, as you look back, it'll be a dot in the history books. But Reform are formed, and obviously off the back of Brexit Party and all the rest of it, and strength to strength.
Yeah.
And I know they've been under the spotlight a little bit lately, but I don't think that's a problem for them.
No. I mean, they've got to go through, you know, take the rough with the smooth. They're going through a pretty bumpy time, I think, at the minute. I don't know... whether the stories over the last sort of few days has sort of not allowed Reform to be at its most high profile, because you would have thought what we saw in, you know, Spain, in Fafeva, I think it's pronounced, you know, with the thousands of migrants that might have come from Morocco into that part of the Spanish territory. You know, the Prime Minister is now talking about stopping the boats a bit more. This is reform territory where you would have thought that they'd want to be front and centre. But obviously, you know, Nigel's got a by-election on. And you're right, the Tories have sort of talked more about immigration. You know, they want to, you know, they leave the ECHR. You know, Kemi is, I think, reasserting Conservative principles within the Conservative Party as it had been traditionally. But she's always got the problem of, well, you know, you had your go as a Tory brand. You know, she's probably more popular. Well, she's more popular than the Conservative Party.
What do you feel? I mean, what are the insiders telling you in the Conservative Party? I mean, do they believe that, you know, politicians always go, well, it's not the next election, it's the one after that we'll win, or whatever. Do you think Kemi Badenoch, I mean, her star is undoubtedly rising. She's pushing a lot of the right buttons. She's a pretty good operator. I wouldn't mark her out as being, you know, unbelievable. I'd say she's pretty good, and I think she's better than most of the Labour lot. But there is something in... I mean, Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe are interesting characters. They're both very mesmeric orators. They both sound good. They're both passionate. They can speak without notes, all that kind of stuff. And they do hit a lot of buttons. Now, you could argue, if you were charged with constructing an argument against all of this, you could say it's mostly really about one policy. It's not really about the health service or defence or any of those things. Reform would say, no, there is much more to us. But in terms of what people feel strongly about, it is that immigration issue more than it's anything else. Yeah. And a sense of common sense. You know, cops knocking on your door because you posted something on social media, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Is there any confidence in the Conservative Party at the moment, do you say?
There is, because I think, you know, the Kemi, as I say, she's doing better for all the reasons that you've just said, and how she's turned the party around. I mean, I think that they recognise the challenge that they've got to shake off the last 14 years, some of which actually was some good work. I was part of it, so I'm not going to...
Well, it's just become a bit of an urban myth to say 14 years. Yeah, no one said it after 7 years.
Exactly.
Or 10 years.
And particularly when, you know, there was an election in 2010, in 2015, in 2017, 2019, all of which people voted Conservative. So, you know, it can't have been that bad. Obviously, things they got some of the big ticket items wrong, such as immigration, for example. We've seen far too much of both legal and illegal immigration taking place where the Tories didn't get a grip of it. So she's got to sort of wrestle with that. I think the one thing they're sort of counting on, you know, in crude terms, is the, you know, they had a lot of political infighting. That's why the Tories got an absolute kicking. True. And now I think they're, you know, not hoping, but they want to see what happens to reform. Now, if reform do have some sort of... If there are more public spats between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage, for example, then, of course, they would be seen as the sensible, you know, safe pair of hands. Kemi's been around, a good while now as a politician, not just as leader of the party. She's coming up with sensible policies, and I think most people... Very hard to argue with some of the policies that she's sort of come up with. So she might just be seen as a reasonable, steady pair of hands, you know, apologies for the mistakes of the past, but we have been in government before. We do actually know what it's like. So to come back to us.
Well, let's have a listen to Nigel Farage talking about Rupert Lowe. This is only a couple of months ago, OK? This is only a couple of months ago. So bearing in mind what's happening now, Rupert Lowe has issued this video, this kind of invite to say, let's get together. Nigel Farage, in his response, hasn't really ruled it out. He doesn't name-check as such Restore or Rupert, but he does say he understands reform will need support from other parties. But he had a very different view of Restore just 2 months ago.
He's a very vengeful man. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I have to say, this idea that I fell out with him, no, I didn't fall out with him. Everyone fell out with him. I mean, you know, Lee Anderson, you know, ex-miner, is pretty rough and tough and can take anything you throw at him. You probably throw it back knowing Lee, but even Lee said, I just can't deal with this person. You know, and we had to put up every week with the ranting, the raving, the shouting, the threats, the libel actions. There are some people, however emollient you try and be in return, that you simply can't deal with.
Do you regret, though, referring him to the police?
I didn't do that. Zia did that. But he didn't physically threaten me. Yeah. But he physically threatened Zia more than once.
Now, where does he go with that? Where does he go? I mean, that's quite unequivocal stuff. Are they about to get back into bed together and have a happy powwow, working out what's going to happen next. We are talking to Zia Youssef later in the programme. We're also talking to Ben Habib, who I think I'm right in saying Ben's support is behind pretty much Restore now. We'll get his take on that too. But that, I mean, based on what you've just heard from politics is fickle, right? I mean, you can almost, like 10 minutes later, see both of them standing there at the podium going, well, it's just the rough and tumble of politics. Or can they?
Yeah, and look, divided parties, and I see this if there was some sort of agreement or loose agreement or just an understanding, but divided parties don't win elections. Divided people within parties and personalities don't win elections. You can easily expose, for example, the Blair-Brown is the obvious relationship, that got exploited in the end because, it was a broken party, people just trying to put on a front. Now, I'm not sure that these two will put on a front to say or let bygones be bygones, because they have said some pretty cursed things about each other, including in that interview. But I do think there has to be now an understanding, I think, amongst everybody, and that's the Conservative Party as well, that you can't necessarily make the perfect the enemy of the good. So even Restore asking for some of its conditions about joining or realigning with Reform. OK, you might want a referendum on having the death penalty. It ain't going to happen. You can ask for it, you can push for it if you get the chance to be in government, but you're only going to get into government if you win the election. And so you've got to maybe park that for a bit. Understand that there is a strength of feeling. I'm not denying that out there, but I just don't think it requires a referendum. That's just for politicians to work out. But it requires the whole of the right to not necessarily do deals with each other, but just have an understanding and read the room that if there are constituencies where the three of them could split the vote, the Conservatives, Reform and Restore, and that lets in a Labour government again in 2029, if that's your mission to stop it, then you've got to put your own agenda aside, you've got to bite your tongue, you've got to hold firm, and just get into office, and then you can change things.
Charlie Rowley, we hit the clock. Thank you. We'll see you later in the week. Charlie Rowley with us here on Talk.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royal tea from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the Royal Tea from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Secretary has brought forward a very rigorous plan in relation to this, and let's remember, of course, the numbers can fluctuate, but overall boat crossings are down quite significantly year on year, so that does suggest that the plan is working.
We've just witnessed drone footage of the French authorities handing out life jackets to illegal immigrants and then waving them goodbye as they head on their way towards the UK. So the French are actively helping and facilitating illegal immigration. In addition to that, the French forces did nothing to stop that huge migrant dinghy. In fact, the dinghy came out, then it went back to the beach to pick up even more illegal immigrants and then departed for a second time. During all of that, the French did nothing, and they even handed out life jackets and waved goodbye as these illegal immigrants head towards the UK. I think that's terrible. I mean that anyone who did cross the channel and arrive in Dover could be immediately deported within around about a week.
Wait about a second, he's just dragging a line by the look of it.
Is that a warning shot towards us? I don't know.
Well, I was trying to work out.
Okay. The French officers could clearly see we were conducting an interview on the back of the fishing boat. They sailed extremely close to us and started firing gunshots, 11 live rounds. We could see the bullets hitting the water behind our boat. They weren't firing before their approach. They weren't firing afterwards. There was no notification of any kind of training exercise. So it did seem to me to be an effort to intimidate us.
The thing that I find, and I should say alarm clock Brits find so frustrating, Chris, and this is why I wanted you on this morning. Yesterday, finally, the unelected Messiah of Manchester stood up and said, to consummate fury from most of us, that Labour's plan to stop dinghy migrants is working. This, Chris, despite the fact that 1,000 illegal migrants have still come into this country in the last 9 days since he became Prime Minister.
Je suis un député dans le Parlement du Royaume-Uni. Why have you allowed the migrants into the water? Why haven't you stopped them?
Our order is to let them go like that.
Your order is to let them go?
We just have to say to them, don't do that, it's dangerous.
So your orders are not to intervene?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Yes, Monday, 3rd of August. Welcome to Talk Breakfast. Ian Collins in for Jezza for the next couple of weeks. Top of the list, the news we broke yesterday on Talk. Rupert Lowe has held out a bit of an olive branch to Nigel Farage. Let's partner up and get this thing done. How do you feel as a Reform voter? How do you feel as a Restore voter? Details to come, and we'll speak to both parties and get your views on this as well. Ben Habib joins us in just a moment. Also, yesterday, Andy Burnham broke cover, finally decided to talk about immigration. He's been there about a month, hasn't said a word on this. He didn't just discuss it, he actually went down to Dover, the coalface of the problem. He has pledged that his government will, quote, be relentless in curbing the number of people arriving in the UK on small boats. Are you buying this? Can Labour seriously solve the immigration crisis? Elsewhere, more than 1,500 convicted foreign criminals are living in taxpayer-funded asylum accommodation because they've not yet been deported. Is there any end to this insanity? One of the reasons, what the Conservatives can't get their head around, is one of the reasons Reform and also Restore have done rather well is because it's specifically that, things like that they will deal with. Britain could face a food shortage if droughts continue. Is there scaremongering going on here? Is it that bad? Are we really in the territory where Bob Geldof is about to write a song about us? Wait and see. We're talking bad seaside results. And on a lighter note, well, on a sort of slightly whiffier note, 1 in 10 Brits haven't had a bath in over a decade. This is according to research. Do people just prefer a shower, or are we living with an unhealthy contingent of utter smell bags living among us? Thoughts on that? Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. On that point of the Reform Pact with Restore, here's a voice note from Tony. Morning, Tony.
Morning, Ian. Tony from Stoke-on-Trent. So, Reform and Restore. Let's get into this. I'm a Reform member, and I've not heard Nigel's response to Rupert Lowe's offer, the olive branch, as yet. But as a Reform member, I've been wanting this to happen for a hell of a long time, including Restore, Reform and Advance and Ben Habib. Obviously, Advance is no longer going. But if Nigel refuses this and lets his ego win over the priority of the British people, then I'm afraid he's lost my membership.
Well, and that's going to be one of the prevailing opinions throughout this, because there are, of course, the hold your nose, get into bed with. I mean, a kind of. Is it an opposition party in the conventional sense? But certainly it was a break-off when Rupert Lowe left Reform, and it was messy. There's no doubt about it. Let's get a word with Ben Habib, chairman of the Great British PAC. Ben, morning to you.
Good morning, Ian.
We only spoke, I think, last Friday or something like that. Who was expecting this? Were you?
Yeah. No, I wasn't. The news broke, actually, when I was on with Mark Dolan yesterday morning, so I didn't get a chance to really fully look at it.
Yeah.
But I thought the voice note you just played said it all, really. You know, the average member of the so-called right-hand side of British politics just wants us to get our act together, come up with a set of policies that's going to save this country, cooperate, and then deliver this country to safety. And party politics has become a slight distraction from that central aim, which is why, having set up Advance, thinking that Advance was necessary in order to keep Reform honest, when Restore emerged, I took Advance back, out of the political frame. And so Advance has effectively ceased to operate. But everyone's crying out for the solutions that this country desperately needs. As much as we may enjoy banging the drum of identifying problems and getting clickbait responses to our social media posts, or indeed, coming on shows and talking stridently about all the problems we face, what the electorate want, what people want, are solutions. And that can only come through debate amongst ourselves, and then ourselves coming together on the political front to deliver those solutions into being. And that would be such a positive, uplifting experience for everyone who for so many years has voted for the kind of agenda that, we on the so-called right should be offering.
How would you define the difference between Restore and Reform? If you were sitting there in front of a bunch of politics students and you were asked to give the defining difference between the two, what would that look like?
I think what Reform has sought to do, and it's done it at great risk, I think, to itself and to the country, is to pivot to the left in order to garner greater support so that it can come into office. But in doing so, it has, in many respects, undermined its original purpose, Reform's original purpose. Many people now call it Tory 2.0. They've got Nadeem Zahawi in it, Jake Berry, Nadine Dorries and others. And it doesn't hold the principles that I think that those of us who were with Reform, including myself to start with, wanted it to hold. What Restore has done, what I wanted Advance initially to do, and to some extent did achieve, and what Restore is doing, is pulling the pendulum further back to where we want Reform to be, where we would expect Reform to be. Restore, in the way that it articulates itself, is, I think, slightly more divisive, potentially, than I would be, in the way that I say many of the same things that Rupert Lowe's media post put out, but I say it in a slightly different way. And even in the conditions that Rupert Lowe articulated yesterday, there were some things there that I thought were unnecessary as part of an opening salvo, if you like, for discussions with Reform. But what we all want is strong borders, sovereign United Kingdom, the ejection of international law from the body of British law, the removal of quangos, the re-establishment of our democracy, a proud, prosperous, sovereign United Kingdom. That's what we want. And we just got to get together and figure that out.
The criticism of Restore seems to be, to put it in basic terms, it's gone too far to the right. There is a sort of an etho-nationalist contingent. There's that sort of Christian, let's be a bit Charlie Kirk-like in the way with people who know very little about Christianity, but it seems like a thing to hold on to. There's been that lot that, and I say that lot deliberately because that's the way Nigel Farage described them, or words to that effect. Is that going to be the danger zone for Nigel Farage, that he's made it very plain that he doesn't want anything to do with, quote, that lot? So straight away there's a problem.
Well, I think a lot of it is to do with how language is used, without wishing to diminish the importance of the issues. And, You know, no one would deny, no one should deny that we are constitutionally a Christian country, that a parliament, our House of Lords, used to comprise, still comprises the bishopric, but used to comprise the highest legal adjudicating body as well, through the law lords, as well as, you know, the peers, all coming together with the Commons as Parliament, as the highest institution in this country for the delivery of democracy, law and our belief system into the country. And we have done significant damage to the unwritten constitutional setup of the United Kingdom. And so putting Christianity back at the heart of our constitution and who we are as a country is fundamentally important. But if you express that in a more strident way by saying, actually, we want all Muslims, I'm not suggesting this for a minute, but if someone were to say this, and I would never say this, but if someone were to say that we want all Muslims to leave the country, what you end up doing is traducing your own philosophy, introducing huge division and unnecessary angst, as it were, into the debate, and you undermine what you're trying to achieve. So what I've always said, and what I think responsible politicians should say, is we want a strong, robust British culture. And culture, by the way, is not just a matter of what you eat and the music you listen to and so on. Culture is a very fundamentally critical part of a society, of nationhood. If you don't have a largely homogeneous culture, you can't really act as a society or a country. And so we've got to put some fundamental building blocks back at the heart of British culture, which include our Christian constitution, our Christian heritage, our culture, our language, our national heroes, our pride in our history, understanding that actually British citizens, rather than the global citizens, British citizens should come first when it comes to making policy, that borders exist. And this is a cultural thing too, that borders exist to create and protect the great British nation state that we once were, and that removing borders is not a good thing. It's not a good thing culturally in any respect whatsoever. Obviously, there are all sorts of security aspects that come with it, but it damages our culture. It damages us as a people not to understand it. And we've practiced this ridiculous multiculturalism, which is lots of different cultures coming into our country, being progressively discriminated in favor of, being put on a pedestal, our own people taking a backseat. All of this is what we need to unpick and remove. And I think actually, if you got Rupert Lowe, Nigel Farage and myself in a room, and we sat down, we discussed it in the terms that I've just discussed it, I suspect we would agree on the vast majority of everything. Yep. And so some of the language used is unfortunate, and I would use different language, I think. And that may just help, you know, bringing people together.
So do you broadly support this idea of a pact?
I think that we on the so-called right, and I don't really subscribe to the left-right nomenclature, but we on the so-called right need to have a debate about the root causes of the problems that this country faces, thereby revealing the solutions that we need, and then we need to unify around those solutions and get the best people together to deliver them into being. It's a very simple business plan. It's like saying, you know, I want to start a company. These are the aims and objects of the company. How do I go about doing it? But what happens is party politics and the promotion of one's own party political agenda seems to defeat that central aim. You listen to Kemi Badenoch. Kemi Badenoch said the other day she won't have any Conservatives who've left the party back into the party. Why make a declaration like that? I understand that she's upset that certain members of her parliament, councillors and so on left. But when you put a line in the sand like that, say no one's welcome back, you're creating division. Why do that? If someone wants to come back to you, if they want to work with you, welcome them with open arms. And I thought, you know, in some respects also the message put out by Rupert yesterday was unnecessary. If you want to merge with reform, if you want to come together with reform, I don't think you start with a set of preconditions as one might, you know, having won a won a battle and you say, well, here are my terms of surrender. That's not the approach. The approach, I think, should be, look, we're all kind of like-minded. Let's get together. Let's sort this out.
He's talked about kicking out the likes of Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick. I mean, that's a big, if that is a red line, that's quite a chunky one as your opening salvo.
Well, exactly. And look, many of us rightly have concerns about Suella Braverman and Jenrick because they presided over the Boris wave. They were both in the Home Office. She was a Secretary of State and he was a minister in the Home Office. But you don't start the coming together of people by divisive red lines. It's, I wouldn't have played it like that.
In terms of where this goes next, Nigel Farage has responded. He hasn't specifically picked up on Rupert Lowe's many points, but he does say he wants to deliver change. I understand, he says, Reform UK will need the support of people from other parties as well as millions who've never voted before. That is the broad coalition I am building. How do you read that statement?
I saw that as a rejection of Rupert Lowe's offer, but a hand of sort of a welcoming hand to all people in Restore, people who support Restore. In other words, we're a broad coalition, join us if you believe in us. I think he says there's only one party that can take on Labour at the next election, and it's Reform UK. And I see that declaration as a overt rejection of Restore Britain, but then holding out a welcoming hand to members and supporters of Restore.
All of this, of course, might become unnecessary because migration and immigration is a huge part of it, of course. But what's happened in the last 24 hours, Ben, is that Andy Burnham solved the problem overnight. I mean, who would have thought it? He didn't just, speak some cheap words. He actually went down to Dover. Let's have a listen to what the Prime Minister had to say.
The number of crossings is down by 50% this year compared with the same period in 2025. And the month we've just had, July, has been the lowest number for 6 years of people crossing. So clearly progress is being made, but we're not complacent, and it's why I am here. So we're just going to be relentless. People want to see this issue addressed. I heard that on the doorsteps in Makerfield, but we also need to build a system that offers safe routes for people as well, because that also takes away the selling point of the gangs.
Now, he could have spent a warm summer weekend under the opulence of Chequers, of course, Ben, but no, our Andy decided to go big. Flanked by the White Cliffs of Dover there, he talked about immigration coming down. July was better than most Julys. It's down by 50%, and he's going to work relentlessly. Do you believe him?
No, not at all. And he revealed his hand completely at the end when he said one of the ways to bring down people smuggling is to have safe routes into this country. What this country is crying out for is the end of mass immigration, both legal and illegal, to the United Kingdom. He hasn't got the message. We are like flotsam, floating, bobbing around, unable really to determine the direction of the country's the direction of travel for the country when it comes to our borders. He talks about numbers being down from previous years. That's not because of any specific policy that the government's implemented. We just bob up and down depending on what the people smugglers are doing. And we've got to remember that every person that comes into this country illegally is adding to the total number that are here. So even if the rate of people coming into the country is reducing, actually the total number of illegal migrants is inexorably rising. And this is not a sustainable situation. The government has to recognize that borders are not a nice to have, they're a need to have. And we've got to put military personnel into the channel and to use force where necessary to make sure no one enters this country. There can be no acceptance of people willfully breaking the law to enter the United Kingdom. Down that road eventually lies the kind of optical scenes that we saw in Ceuta the other day. We will be swarmed at some point. Europe will be overrun. The United Kingdom will be overrun. There has to be a recognition that to protect civil society, we have to be strong at our borders, and that may require taking steps which are not palatable for people like Burnham to say. But we've got to be strong and deter these people from coming to this country.
Ben, great to have you with us. Have a great day. Enjoy the nice weather. Always thorough stuff from you, and we will speak soon. He is Ben Habib, of course, chairman of the Great British Pack, and, of course, very... I would say a decisive voice in many respects. He's not going full-on Team Rupert. He's critical of some of what Rupert had to say. The Restore leader, of course, has offered reform this pact, but only if they ban the burqa, hold a referendum on the death penalty and sideline some of those Tories there as well. Sorry, Christian, what did you say? We are going to get a word now with Chris Philp, Shadow Home Secretary, of course. Chris, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to have you with us. It's a beautiful day. The heat wave is among us. That dead grass of College Green, still as dead as it was a couple of days ago. But a live politician standing on it, which is always a bit of good news, right? So the threat against the Conservatives. I mean, look, reform have been nipping at your heels and overtaking you in the polls consistently for many, many months now. But now there's another kid on the block. You've got Rupert Lowe and Restore. He wants to merge with Nigel Farage with conditions attached. But if they did, are the Conservative Party dead?
No, certainly not. We are on the up. Kemi Badenoch is getting more and more popular with every month that passes. Our poll ratings are slowly rising. Reforms are coming down. Nigel Farage is currently engaged in a battle to the end with a man dressed as a dustbin in Clacton. And the most recent opinion poll basically had a pretty much three-way tie between us, Labour and Reform. But Reform are on the way down. Nigel Farage has some very serious questions to answer about the £5 million personal bung he received from a crypto billionaire based in Thailand. He held this by-election to try and escape scrutiny by the Independent Standards Commissioner, but that's going to restart after the by-election, assuming Nigel Farage manages to beat the bin. We'll see if he manages to or not. So I think Reform's troubles are only just starting. There's only one credible party in town with proper plans to end illegal immigration and clamp down on criminals, and that's the Conservative Party.
Did the people of Manchester that voted in the mayoral elections last Thursday, did they miss all of that? Because your vote was below both Reform and Restore, 7.7%. And it's worth just remembering that in 2017, your share of the vote was 22.7%. You've been obliterated, Chris.
Well, I mean, that was a mayoral by-election with a 25% turnout. If you look at the national opinion polls, they tell a very different story. And as I say, you know, Kemi is doing really well as party leader. And if you look at, like, you know, the questions like the economy, we're the only party with a sensible plan on the cost of living, getting taxes down, cutting welfare, which is out of control under Labour. Reform have no plan to cut welfare, for example. You know, we're the only party with credible policies. We're the only party with credible policies to come out of the ECHR and deport all illegal immigrants within a week of arrival. And I think as the public, over the coming year or 2 or 3 years, see those policies, we're going to continue to go up in the polls. And I think Reform are going to continue to go down. They've been going down in the polls for a while now. I think that'll continue.
Have you had your fox shot, however, not by Mr Farage, but by Mr Burnham, our new Prime Minister? It was only, what, a week ago, Chris, you were out there paddling the shores of Calais, and I thought this was great, what you did there as well, chatting to the cops. I thought the line from the French police, how do you deter them? And the officer says to you, we tell them don't do that, which is the sort of thing that a supply teacher might tell a kid who's thrown a paper aeroplane across the classroom. However, Andy Burnham was down there yesterday. He went to Dover, says, look, these crossings are down 50%. July they were down. He's not going to rest until they've sorted this out. He's been quite clear he's going to be relentless on boat crossings.
Well, it's all words, isn't it? I mean, we heard it all from Keir Starmer when he claimed he was going to smash the gangs. That turned out to be a total joke because 75,000 illegal immigrants crossed the Channel under Starmer. And now Andy Burnham has been Prime Minister for, what, 12 days? And in his first 12 days, 2,000, in fact, to be precise, 2,057 illegal immigrants crossed the Channel. He's all talk and no action. He's not going to leave the ECHR and deport all foreign criminals, which is what, and for illegal immigrants, which is what is needed to end this crisis. He's not going to do that at all. In fact, he's talking about setting up safe, he calls them safe and legal routes to let even more people into the country from the third world. Andy Burnham is not going to grip this problem at all. The only party with a plan is the Conservatives. We'll leave the ECHR, and every illegal immigrant that arrives, be no asylum claim, no human rights claim, no modern slavery claim, no hotel, no court case, just deportation within a week back to their country of origin, if possible, or a safe third country like Rwanda. And then pretty quickly, they're not going to bother crossing, are they, if they know they're going to get kicked out straight away. Andy Burnham is not going to do any of those things, and that's why the illegal immigrants are going to keep coming in. The only thing Andy Burnham has to do is cross his fingers and hope the Channel weather is a little bit choppy. That's his only plan, as far as I can see.
This comes at a time when we're reading today, and there it is, front page of The Sun this morning, that French police are billing us 8,000 quid for every migrant they turn back. And there it is on the front page, le rip-off. Your response, Chris Phil?
Well, actually, that's terrible, and it's even worse than that, because even when they supposedly catch them, they just let them go, and they can just try again the next day or the day after that. So they get through eventually. And, you know, I was on the French beaches, as you say, I was out on the Channel on Tuesday and on the French beaches on Wednesday, and I saw 100 illegal immigrants getting into a dinghy, a massive dinghy. I was in the water myself, waist deep in water, standing right next to the dinghy. There were 10 French gendarmes, who we're paying for. Shabana Mahmoud is paying for those gendarmes. And what were they? They were armed. There were 10 of them. And what were they doing? They were standing by the water's edge, doing literally nothing to stop that boat, even though the migrants were boarding in only knee-deep water. And the migrants had been on the beach for about 3 hours beforehand, waiting for the dinghy to show up. The gendarmes were there then, doing absolutely nothing. So I think Shabana Mahmoud needs to urgently get a grip of this and stop paying the French so much of our money, £660 million, until the French actually start doing something. The Belgians, their neighbours next door, they are much more effective. The Belgians do stop migrants on the beach. The Belgians do stop the boats near the coast in the water, and that is effective. The French are totally ineffective, but Shabana Mahmoud and Andy Burnham and the Labour government are too weak to get the French to do their job properly.
I don't think anybody...
I saw it with my own eyes last week.
I know, and it was extraordinary to watch, and it was great kind of political journalism, as well as the point you were making for your party. Most people support that. Most people support what you've just said. But as a party, can you own this conversation? I mean, you've got to remember, this is in Nigel Farage's DNA. His entire political existence was sort of predicated on this narrative, on this story about immigration, about autonomy for the UK, whether it was getting out of Brussels, whether it was looking after our borders. He's been at this for years. For many people, he's the go-to voice on this. You guys are playing catch-up. Only today we hear that reform will put the Navy in the Channel. I mean, this takes things a step further. The Conservatives didn't do that. People saw numbers rise under the Tories. How do you... I appreciate you're a new front bench. I appreciate that policies evolve. I know you have a new leader, etc. But can you really convince people that you have a greater emphasis on this than Reform UK?
Yeah, well, look, as you say, we are under new leadership. We've got a new leader, and I'm a new Shadow Home Secretary. We do have new leadership in the Conservatives. And the fact I was out there last week getting shot at in the Channel by the French Navy while trying to do an interview on the back of a fishing boat, and I was waist-deep in water, surrounded by illegal immigrants, directly challenging a people smuggler. No other politician has done that. I've never seen Nigel Farage or that other guy, whatever his name is, waist deep in water, challenging people smugglers. I haven't seen them doing that. So I think that tells you. You can have a look at my social media, I'd say to your viewers. You'll see I'm taking this seriously. I was literally out there in the water challenging a people smuggler personally. No one else is doing that. And we also have credible plans. So it's all very well having slogans like, oh, yeah, we'll put the Navy in the Channel. But, you know, Reform don't have a plan to properly fund the armed forces. They haven't even got a defence spokesman, and they can't answer basic questions like, what are you going to do with the illegal immigrants if the French won't let you disembark? Now, I've got no problem with taking action, physical action, in the Channel, but you do have to have a proper plan, and we do have a proper plan to leave the ECHR and deport all of these illegal immigrants within a week of arrival. And we know that'll work because it worked in Australia about 13 years ago, and it actually worked in America last year as well. So we've got so to answer your question as well, we've got a proper, credible, thought-out plan to sort this out in the Conservative Party under new leadership.
Chris Philp, thank you for your time. Appreciated. Chris Philp, MP, Shadow Home Secretary. Are you buying into the Conservatives' line? It was, I think we'd all agree, and this isn't the problem of being purposely disagreeing to a point that somebody makes. What he said there was bang on. But, of course, the history of the Conservative Party and immigration and the Boris wave and the lack of stopping the boats. I know we could argue forever, you know, had Rwanda got off the ground, it might have started to make a kink into an inroad into stopping but maybe it would have done. Maybe it would have gone in that direction. Although the Rwanda plan was never a case of, you know, you arrive on a beach and then you're flown to Rwanda. I mean, there was a whole bureaucracy surrounding it. It wasn't straightforward either. But your thoughts, can the Conservatives outdo Reform on immigration? Can Andy Burnham outdo all of them? Because he was down there at Dover and reckons maybe you could. 0344 499 1000. You can drop us a voice note there as well. Don't go away. Grace with you in just a second. Let's go. Are we go to Grace now? Yeah, let's go to Grace in Ealing now. Grace, how you doing? I think Grace might have gone to sleep. I tell you what, stay there, Grace. We'll come back to you. That could have been a sleepy Grace. She has been hanging on for a little while, and it is early morning. You know, does happen. Chris Philp, of course, mentioned the Clacton by-election. An apt moment, then, to get a list of all the candidates standing.
So the full list of candidates for the Clacton by-election: Joseph 77, the Independent; Adam Akatip, the Forward Party; Count Binface, the Count Binface Party; Nick the Incredible Flying Brick, the Official Monster Raving Loony Party; Tony Kane's an Independent; Woke Trump Kazi is an Independent; William Stewart James Colston is the Social Democratic Party candidate; Rhys Cowan, an Independent; Glenn Charles Cummings, an Independent; Martin Davis, the Freedom Alliance Real People Real Alternative; Andy Earlam's an Independent; Nigel Farage, the Reform UK Party; Atiye Fards, an Independent; Lawrence Fox for the Reclaim Party; Tony Francis is an Independent; Robin Green, an Independent; Abby Hookway, an Independent; Howling Lord Hope, the Official Monster Raving Loony Party; Stephen Richard Ingram is an Independent, as is Amy Morris; Derek Norbert Morris is an Independent; Michael Noel O'Keefe, an Independent; Martin O'Brien, an Independent; Nick Pellis, an Independent; and Ketanar Kumar Pipiaya is the UK Voice Safer and Stronger UK Party; Daniel Pocock's an Independent; James Ransley, the Consensus Party candidate; Jerry Smith is an Independent; Kai Stevens for the British Democrats; John Stevens for rejoin the EU; Baron von Thunderclap for the Official Monster Raving Loony Party; Pamela Walford is an Independent; Marcus White, Everyone is God Party; and Mark Wilkinson for the Independents.
current affairs, international news, letting criminals off while sending... Oi! Oi! You shut up. I'm trying to record something.
Stand by for 3 powerhouse hours of breaking news, challenging views. I don't give a flying damn about international law. I think people will viscerally reject this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, 25 to 8. It's Ian in for Jezza for the next couple of weeks. It's a bright and sunny summer's morning, and you're very welcome to the Empire of Common Sense here. There's a lot to get through, all the serious stuff, of course. On a slightly lighter note, we were talking about British seaside resorts that need a lick of paint. I went down to the Isle of Sheppey over the weekend. It was an experience, I'll tell you that much. Let's get a word on this very point from George. Morning, George.
Morning, Ian. Hope you're having a good show. George from Leicester. So, RE Isle of Sheppey. I understand what you're saying about Isle of Sheppey. It definitely needs something done to it. We had most of our holidays down there up until the late 70s. I'm 60 at the end of this year in Laysdown, and my mum and dad actually retired to the middle of the island. I believe it's called Minster. Anyway, all I was going to say was, if you want to have a Google, one of the famous things about the Isle of Sheppey, I think it's called Parker Street or Parker Avenue or something. It's Parker something anyway. And it's famous for the Christmas tree lights. It's absolutely amazing, and people definitely want to have a look at that. Anyway, take care, mate. Bye for now.
George, thank you for that. You make a great point, by the way. So it was in I was in both of those places yesterday. I was in Minster to start with. Then we went down to Laysdown. I do know this. It wasn't my first time there. I've lived in that neck of the woods nearby, worked at a local radio station down there. So we were always doing stuff on the Isle of Sheppey. They used to have that big cabaret room in Laysdown, which I noticed was still there, but I think closed down. Yeah, George is right. Like any area, you know, there's pockets of joy to be had. What I find quite sad, and Blackpool has the same issue. Margate had it, Folkestone still has some of it. Haven't checked out Scarborough for a number of years, so not sure what's going on over there. But often it is a lick of paint. You just think, just tidy it up a bit. Just give it a little tidy up, and that will reflect the amount of people that descend on what was once, as George said there, it was your go-to place for a lot of people. It was go-to place, retirement place as well. 0344 499 1000. Back to that issue of restore and reform. Grace in Ealing is back with us. Are you wide awake, Grace?
Yeah. Apologies for some technical difficulties earlier.
That's all right. That happens. What have you got for us?
I think that reconciliation is generally a good thing. However, I don't think that reform should take on restore. I saw Rupert Lowe's entire video, and I was really concerned, frankly, by the way that he was lamenting the fact that we as white people will eventually not be a majority as a proportion of the population of Britain, because it implies that people of colour are somehow inherently, I don't know, making Britain worse, and that's just not true. That's how it came across, the way that he was speaking. I mean, the fact that we as white people will no longer be a majority in Britain one day is mostly because people like myself are not having children. It's not because people of colour are just taking over, but a person's character is what matters, not the pigmentation of their skin, and he seemed to think that Britain is doomed if it's not a majority white country anymore. And in turn, he said that this is a Christian country. Now, Christianity has really shaped many of the things about our country, but Christianity is a personal decision. It's not something that we're born with, and it's not something that's connected to being white. Jesus was not white, And so, I mean, the people who are most keeping Christianity alive in our country are black people. So for him to kind of insinuate that people of colour are somehow morally different.
I think his I think his argument is kind of faulted at that point, because if we're talking about a cultural kind of cohesion, I think that is a more powerful and a simpler argument to take on board than dividing people up by colour. If he's talking about a religion, and I think that's probably where he's coming from, then that's fine, because we can talk about, you know, if there is a dominant religion and culturally its value system is not necessarily worse or better, but just different, and therefore at odds with what we see as tolerance or freedom of speech or any of those things, that's a fair point to raise as well. So I think the cultural argument, social cohesion argument, is a more sensible and intelligent argument than just specifically colour.
Yeah, I think it seemed to me quite eerie the way he was seeming in this video to make out that colour and values are intrinsically connected. And that's not true. And we each choose for ourselves whether we're going to, for instance, choose to follow God or not. Most people just presume that God is fictional in our country at the moment. That's what most white British people seem to think. And they, you know, imagine, for instance, that science has disproven God or something like that, which is erroneous. But they've got every right to make that decision. But it's a personal decision. We're not born, actually, with all of our moral choices or our theological leanings. We each make those decisions for ourselves. And if the country becomes less white, that in itself does not mean that the country is going to be markedly different. People losing values might make the country different, but that's not really because of people being born with more melanin. Other things are a cause for concern, but not melanin levels. Let's concentrate on people becoming more selfish or people not respecting the law. People not being white isn't the problem.
All right, on that point, Grace, thank you very much indeed. You want to take issue with what Grace just said? 0344 499 1000. Roger in Wellingborough says, of course, the number of boats is down is nothing to do with Labour. They're using larger boats. I think also what's happened, Roger, the number of people is down a bit, but the idea this is down to some kind of brilliance of either Yvette Cooper or Shabana Mahmood is absolutely nonsense. There is a downturn in the whole of Europe at the moment, as I understand it. Let's get a word on this and other connected stories. Robert Bates is with us, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Robert, good morning to you. I mean, it's an interesting picture now. We had the Prime Minister down there in Dover. He hasn't said a squeak about immigration in the last 3 weeks, and suddenly he pitches up by the White Cliffs to say that he's going to be relentless on boat crossings. I think he's rather hoping numbers drop regardless of anything he does. We've had Chris Philp, Shadow Home Secretary, last week, wading into the channel at the other end on the French side, interviewing the cops and saying, you know, what are you doing? Why are you not actually stopping these boats? And he went through all of that, and then he did an interview. You can see that on the screen now. It's my old producer up there. You'll know him as well, Christian, won't you? Doing the interview with Chris Philp, and it gets almost shot at by some Frenchman going mad with a pistol on a boat. And now you've got Nigel Farage saying they're going to send the Navy in. It's like a scene from Pirates of the Caribbean over there at the channel right now.
Well, I think it absolutely is, and despite Andy Burnham's best efforts to spend his first couple of weeks completely hiding from this crisis, it has been foisted upon him by events. Over 2,000 crossings since he's become Prime Minister already. And I think actually the line he is taking, which is this idea, and we're seeing it a lot from the Home Office, that the French are being wonderfully helpful in stopping this crisis, and that, you know, they're stopping a record number of individuals crossing. Well, I think that is actually a real worrying basis upon which to base your policy towards this crisis, because over half of migrants attempting to cross the channel are still getting past the French. And as we saw with the Chris Philp incident last week, they are becoming increasingly obstinate and actually refusing to do anything above and beyond the bare minimum, and in many cases just waving migrants onto the boat. So when it comes to this suggestion of using the Navy, I've often sort of thought it wouldn't be necessary if you had a proper deterrent policy in place, but I do think increasingly it will have a useful effect of maybe encouraging the French to actually do a bit more, because it's embarrassing for them, but also actually sending a bit more of a clear message to those migrants looking to make the crossing, because unfortunately this is something that's going to keep rumbling on if we just cross our fingers and hope the French are going to solve it for us.
What is your take on this idea of Andy Burnham, essentially pointing to Labour's success in the numbers? He said down 50%. Your take on that?
Well, part of the reason why they're down by such a dramatic percentage is because last year, the start of the year and the first half of the year was absolutely crazy. It was on track to be the worst year on record, and Labour was saved at the end of the year by the weather, so it didn't quite claim that mantle. But I think, unfortunately, again, it is just sort of slightly fiddling the numbers. I think if we look back to 2018, when we had a major incident declared, when just 200 across the channel in that year, and now we've sort of let 200,000 in, we are losing perspective as to how much of a crisis this is, how abnormal a situation it is. And yes, the numbers might have fallen down somewhat, but we're still on over 14,000 this year alone. Hardly any of them will ever be removed from the country, and will end up being large fiscal costs on the taxpayer, and that's before we even get into the cultural costs of this as well. So I think definitely the numbers have come down, but I don't think actually, even if another boat never crossed the channel, we've still got a national emergency on our hands because of the numbers that have come across in the last 8 years.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you've got, I don't know how many people still stuffed in hotels and HMOs and unprocessed and or half processed, and challenges against processes. We also then know that even if you're told, no, you haven't made the grade, it could be yonks sometimes before you end up getting deported anywhere. I mean, we saw this other connected story, Daily Express splashing with this one this morning, 1,500 foreign criminals in housing paid for by us, yet to be deported. So, as you rightly say on this point, Robert, even if you solve the basics of the problem, you're still left with, I'm tempted to say, hundreds of thousands of people that still need looking at.
And I do think it is hundreds of thousands, because each individual's asylum claim is rejected, and actually when you go through the asylum process in the courts, most of them are approved on very shaky grounds. But even if they are rejected, they still get to stay, because we can't return them under the Refugee Convention if they're able to claim that their country of origin is not safe. And on the Express splash, I think this is an astonishing state of affairs here. We've got illegal migrants who have come into the country, committed crimes against the British people, and rather than ensure their removal and think, actually, we're not going to show due regard to your human rights, you've probably breached the human rights of Brits, we're actually paying to house them back in many cases, the communities where they committed their crime in the first place. It's British people last, yet again.
Yeah, and on that point, Robert, great to have you on with us. Thank you. Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. One of the reasons, and when we keep talking, this is, because I do this for a living, and I know that most of you guys listening to us now are engaged in these conversations, and not all your fellow Brits are, it's worth saying. But I keep coming back to, I know the Manchester mayoral election was sort of a by-election, but it's still a big election. And when you look at what the Conservatives did, 7.7%, beaten by Restore at 8.7%, and comfortably beaten by Reform at 21%. Now, remember, in 2017, that ain't that long ago, less than 10 years, the Conservatives were on nearly 23% of the vote. There was only really the Tories, Labour and the Lib Dems that were making any kind of headline around, because that's the way it was. It's changed completely. Restore, of course, if there was a snap election tomorrow, Restore simply would not be able to put that amount of candidates up required for it. They could go for select areas. They wouldn't win anything, but they can cause some dents in the right places. Reform, however, would win. And every single poll says they would win. Now, whether they would win an outright majority is yet to be seen. Labour are kind of slightly ahead in the last couple of opinion polls I read. It would therefore require some kind of pact. Now, would you rather Reform UK went into bed with a Conservative Party or with Restore Britain? Thoughts on all of that? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a voice note on this very story from Steve. Morning, Steve.
Yeah, the Rupert Lowe, Nigel Farage thing, Ian, it's not going to happen. Rupert Lowe knows that, but I don't think they're ever going to join together. I think Rupert knows that, and the conditions what he's put down, he knows Nigel cannot go for. So it's a bit of a ploy. I don't know why he's doing it. I think he just wants to get it in there first, just to say, well, Nigel's not listening. You can all see I did try, but he's not listening to me, and he doesn't want to join forces.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, it is Talk, 8 minutes to 8 o'clock morning. Bright and sunny, beautiful summer's morning, 3rd of August. Ian in for Jezza. A load of comments on this. Julian says, morning Ian and Charlie. Charlie Rowley was with us a little earlier. The Tories are the Amstrad of politics, and Reform are the Bang and Olufsen. Tories are desperate and comical to watch. They are finished. What they've got to do, if they... I mean, Chris Philp doing the thing in the Channel, that's great, and it does... You know, it highlights an issue. They're going to struggle to get away from the fact that they were part of a government that did nothing at all. That said, you could reasonably argue so were Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick, and they're now high-profile members of Reform, although they would counter it by saying, well, they did actually leg it from the government and the party because they didn't agree with them. Kemi Badenoch, star rising, I would say a bit. But, of course, it takes more than one person. What the Conservatives do have is they have the sort of election apparatus in place. They have the experience of that. They're not going to get it entirely right, but they are sort of match fit if you had to get in terms of numbers, vetted candidates and all of that. They've got most of that. Not all. I'm not blowing smoke here, certainly not. But that is their one saving grace. If they went into an election, they could... that they're more or less in place. Reform would say, yep, we're in place as well. They've worked ridiculously hard on making sure, because they've had some vetting issues in the past, which new party doesn't, and they've largely addressed that, so they would say, yep, we're ready to go as well. Restore, however, if there was an election tomorrow, I don't think much is going to happen in terms of mass candidates being stood in 600 constituencies. That ain't going to happen. 0344 499 1000. I also want to bring you this, before we go back to some comment from you. Veterans' benefits docked in stealth raid on military pensions. I feel bilious when I read these headlines. Ministers have been accused of launching a stealth clawback of military pensions, leaving veterans who claim benefits thousands of pounds worse off. These are officials at the DWP, the Department for Work and Pensions, have informed veterans their military pensions is considered unearned income and will therefore result in a pound-for-pound reduction in benefits. Let's speak with Hugh Andre, CEO of We Served, an ex-British Army captain. I tell you what, Hugh, I mean, I've got a general beef. I think we all have to a degree, but this absolutely drives me nuts. This idea of, you know, if you can find another way to tax us, we will find it. And governments, I believe, have a duty to find fewer ways to tax us. That to me is an intelligent government. We should be doing things that don't require always going and dipping into the public's pension pots. And here we have something that's a double bubble of doom. Not only it's yet again, we're going to take more tax, but it's from our veterans, which gives it a particularly pronounced flavour.
Yeah. Good morning, Stephen. Ian, sorry, and thank you for inviting me on. It's a tough one to read, isn't it? Because it's a mistake that's been made by, I guess, the DWP. And, you know, emotionally for me as a veteran, you know, I would naturally go to my heart and say, well, what price is their service worth?
Yeah.
What price was their service worth? I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's about £5 million they're looking to claw back.
Wow.
Is that right? I think
that would, well, when I look at stories such as some claiming that they could be, some veterans reportedly been ordered to repay tens of thousands of pounds previously paid to them, then I can see that it would be quite easy to get to that number.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's happened to about 350 or so veterans. It's been a mistake has been made, but you know, here's the thing: the government can waive it. So it's a government by law. The government can waive that decision.
Yeah,
it's actually damn hard. I have a military pension. I have no idea what it's worth. If I could be honest with you, I know no idea where to go to find out what it's worth.
They'll send you down a rabbit hole. They'll send you down one of those lovely HMRC rabbit holes where you will spend the best part of a day clicking on links that only to return to where you began.
Where you began.
It'll make a tour of Afghanistan look like a bad hors d'oeuvre.
Walk in the park. No, absolutely. And you know, this is why we set up We Serve. So for exactly this sort of reason, you know, we can have one single place where people, veterans, male, female, and their families can go to find out this sort of information. So we will put it on the We Serve platform under the news and media page with the links to the right place. But ultimately, what we're talking about here are veterans of quite a senior age being told that they've been overpaid due to a mistake by the government.
Yeah.
And now, you know, in their dotage, having to repay, as you say, thousands and thousands of pounds. And, you know, let's be brutally honest, Ian, how many people have got thousands and thousands of pounds?
Quite, yes.
Just lying around.
Particularly if you've been, you know, receiving your pension for a number of years, and then suddenly somebody comes along. You know, in any other walk of life, I think you would have an obvious legal claim to say, well, OK, even if that extra money stops now, there's no back repayment going on here. You've got to just swallow it, government. But HMRC are great at not applying logical rules to itself.
They're actually talking about now, in some cases, taking the amount owed going forward. And I think that the veterans themselves clearly need to take advice from the Army Pension or Military Pension Service.
Yep.
But what they also need to take into consideration, and we'll talk facts for a moment, they've got to be able to demonstrate hardship, because the government could waive, and frankly, £5 million to government is a drop in the ocean compared to all the, you know, the useless PPE, billions they spent on COVID, whereas these are men and women who served their country for 5 million. But to a veteran, 10,000, 1,000, 10,000, 40,000 in one case. That's a hell of a lot of money. So the veterans themselves, if you're listening, and you have received a letter, or you fall into the category of the revenue coming after you for money that they paid you by mistake, you've got to be able to demonstrate the hardship it would create by taking away that money.
Indeed.
Secondly, will there be an impact on your health? And I would suggest there absolutely would be. If someone came and knocked on my door and asked for 40,000 back, or 40,000, whatever back, I'd have a wobble. And thirdly, you can justify it as a departmental mistake. So I think get in touch with their local MPs, think about the hardship it's going to create, think about the impact on their health, and finally, I think this is a government's opportunity to really step up and be counted for the right reasons and waive it. It's a mistake.
Absolutely. Waive it indeed. Hugh, great to have you on. It's always a great qualified voice, and I know you guys do great work with ex-service personnel and veterans. That's Hugh Andre, CEO of We Served, an ex-British Army captain. Thank you to him. More from you on the way. 03444991000. News at 8 is coming next, right here on Talk.
People are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
It is therefore my honour to declare that the duly elected leader of the Labour Party is Andy Burnham.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much. I believe in all of you, and I am confident we can do it. Thank you very much. I have just come from Buckingham Palace, where I have accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government. I know people at home are fed up with politics. I hear you, and I want to be honest with you. We have not been good enough, and we need to be better. We will be.
This man has no mandate whatsoever. He didn't stand on the 2024 general election manifesto. You cannot make the biggest change in British politics in 40 years without a mandate from the British people, and it will be only decent, right and proper to call a general election on that issue and to do it now.
Our fifth Prime Minister in 4 years. Blimey. And, well, look, we want him to succeed. But will this one be any different? Andy Burnham, the new head honcho, the speed this all happened, I know this is a well-trodden debate already, is actually breathtaking. 1 minute he was Mayor of Greater Manchester. What, a month and a bit ago he wasn't even an MP. The next he's holding keys to number 10 without the country ever really having a chance to scrutinise him in a prospective prime ministerial nothing at all. We really know very little.
I think Burnham has to walk a fine line. I think that's probably what's going on, because if he were to sweep into Downing Street and say, I'm going to change everything, I'm going to fix everything, I'm going to do things completely differently to Starmer, then people would say, hold on, mate, we need a general election in that case, because no one voted for that. No one voted for you to be Prime Minister. You weren't standing in the 2024 general election. We've never seen your manifesto. Who the hell are you? That's what people would be asking.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Wise words indeed. Yeah, good morning. Welcome to the home of common sense. It is Talk Breakfast. Ian Collins in for Jezza for the next couple of weeks. Welcome along. It's a sunny summer's day. Monday, 3rd of August. I was about to say it's nearly Christmas. What I did spot yesterday in the supermarket, I didn't spot any Christmas stuff, but this is the subtle message. So I spotted big displays of roses and celebrations. That's the beginning, right? And it's midsummer. It's the 3rd of August. And they've whipped out the confectionery. Ready for Christmas. Top of the list this morning, the news that we broke here on Talk yesterday. Rupert Lowe has held out some sort of olive branch to Nigel Farage. Let's partner up and get this thing done, he says. How do you feel as a Reform voter about that? How do you feel as a Restore voter about that? Details to come, and we'll speak to supporters of both parties as well. Also, Brendan O'Neill, join us in just a couple of moments. Yesterday, Andy Burnham broke cover and finally decided to talk about immigration. In fact, he didn't just discuss it, he went to Dover on a mission, down at the coalface of the problem. He has pledged his government will, quote, be relentless in curbing the number of people arriving in the UK on small boats. Are you buying this? Can Labour seriously solve the migration crisis? Thoughts on that? Elsewhere and connected, more than 1,500 convicted foreign criminals are living in taxpayer-funded asylum accommodation in this country because they've not yet been deported. How in the name of can that happen? Is there any end to this insanity? More on that as well. And Britain could face food shortages if droughts continue. Now, is that a bit of scaremongering? Is it sort of in the climate crisis department? Is this really the territory where Bob Geldof's going to be releasing a new single for us? People walking across the prairies of Essex and Kent looking for wheat? I do wonder. And what about this one? On a much lighter note, 1 in 10 Brits haven't taken a bath in more than a decade. Filthy swines. This is according to research. Do people just prefer a shower is the obvious question, or are we just living with an unhealthy contingent of utter smell bags? I would like to know. Thoughts on this? Everything you need to know. We'll bring you all the breaking news. 0344 499 1000. Pamela in Bolton says, definitely Reform, Restore. Together they could stop this country going down the gurgler. To your earlier caller, Grace, she's got the wrong end of the stick. Rupert Lowe is talking about culture, not skin colour, says Pam. Thank you for that, Pamela. Let's get a voice note on this very point from Carl. Morning, Carl.
Hi, Ian, Carl in Bury. Rupert Lowe, cynical move in my opinion. Them demands, who is he to demand? Tiniest party, 7% of the vote. And he's making 5 demands. And let's be honest with you, they're unrealistic demands. As every reform, we're going to turn around and say, right, we're going to get rid of Andrea Jenkins. We're going to get rid of Suella Braverman. What's wrong with them? So what? They came from the Tories. I used to be Conservative. Reform UK and most of Restore were probably came from the Conservatives anyway, most of the members.
I mean, that's fair. Nigel Farage was a Conservative. Richard Tice was a Conservative. I think Rupert Lowe's point on that is an interest. If that is to be a red line in this, if it gets that far, then I think that would be perhaps dismissed at first base. Let's speak with Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer at Spike, journalist, author and regular with us here on Talk. Brendan, morning to you.
Hi, Ian. How's it going?
It's good. I mean, normally in the summer, of course, we get this lull and, you know, everybody from columnists and writers and broadcast, we're looking around thinking, you know, God, there's got to be something out there. And then suddenly, bang, this thing comes from Rupert Lowe over the weekend. I don't think many people expected it. What are your initial thoughts on this olive branch, if that is the right word, that he's offered to reform?
Ian, I am so sceptical of this. I think reform should avoid it like the plague. I think I don't think it's an olive branch at all. I think it is another kind of digital ruse. It's an attempt to confront reform and to say to them, look, do you agree with these 5 points we're putting in front of you? Or are you a bunch of cowards and weaklings who won't even go along with these straightforward policies? I think it's another attempt to set reform up. But also, aside from that, you know, the thing about Restore that has always got on my nerves is that they are driven by a pathological hatred for reform. I was in Makerfield during the by-election there, which of course Andy Burnham won, and Restore's leaflet was just 100% from top to bottom an anti-reform leaflet. It was basically saying, don't vote for reform. There are a bunch of sellouts. There are a bunch of old Tories. There are a bunch of losers. The idea that they would now put out an olive branch and say, oh, we'd like to work with you after all, I'm not buying it. And I hope that Nigel Farage and Zia Youssef won't buy it either.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? I think you're right, and I thought the sort of red line thing was just a bit daft, frankly. You know, you've got to get rid of Suella Brahe, you've got to get rid of Robert Jenrick. Well, on that basis, you'd have to get rid of probably everybody who were once former Tories, as I was just saying.
Exactly. And, you know, the other thing is that reform has a real chance to become a big player in British politics if it plays its cards right. I do think reform has been flagging for the past few months. I don't think they've been on the front foot. I don't think they've taken advantage of huge issues that have blown up in our politics in the way that they ought to have. So they've got to pull their socks up, but they have the chance to be a huge powerhouse and even perhaps to play a role in government at some point soon. But, you know, the thing about Restore, the other thing about Restore is that its online following is incredibly dodgy. I mean, it's full of these kind of strange nerds for a start, but then there's also people who have got extreme views. There's people who are borderline fascistic in the digital following of Restore. There are people who have praised Hitler who are also either contributors or donators or members of Restore. And whenever Rupert Lowe has been asked about this, he's basically said, well, I don't care. You know, reform does not want to be hanging around with people like that. The kind of people who want to vote for reform, for Nigel Farage, for the things that he wants to do, are the decent working classes, the people who've been left behind and ignored by the other parties. These are normal, decent people. And I think attaching thousands of oddballs who follow Restore to that movement, I think that would be a terrible mistake, and reform should think very carefully about doing anything like that.
I mean, there was this, as you will have seen, Brendan, this sort of response from Nigel Farage. It doesn't particularly name check, as far as I can see, Rupert Lowe or Restore, but he does say to deliver he's talking about only one party has the possibility of delivering change. He goes on to say, to deliver that change, I understand Reform UK will need the support of people from other parties, as well as millions who've never voted. That is the broad coalition I am building. What do you take from that?
Yeah, that's true. He does need to build a broad coalition. And I think probably at the moment, reform has reached the limit of the kinds of voters that pretty clearly want to vote for reform, which tend to be former Labour voters, some former Tory voters, people who are ticked off with the old two parties. I think reform has probably reached the limit of those voters. So it does need to break beyond that. It does need to start appealing to other people, especially in London, in central Manchester, in the cities which tend to be colonised by Labour primarily. So it does need to break beyond its current coalition. I think what that should mean is that Rupert Lowe should tell his supporters to vote for reform. I mean, that's what should happen. Restore is pretty much a digital party. It's pretty much a social media party. It doesn't have networks in the real world in the way that Reform does. It doesn't have those grassroots movements or huge networks across the country of activists and thinkers and people doing the work on the ground in the way that Reform does. So it's not a real prospect. And I just think that Rupert Lowe has got ideas above his station if he thinks that his tiny party can suddenly say, oh, we don't hate your guts after all, Reform. In fact, we're going to work with you if you follow these 5 guidelines. I just think it's a bit preposterous.
It does have, of course, support from Elon Musk and that guy, Tommy Robinson.
Yeah, it has a lot of support from Elon Musk. I'm not convinced Elon Musk understands British politics particularly well, though I'm very grateful for the fact that he has blown open X and made it far more free than it was when it was Twitter, when you couldn't even say a man is not a woman without being banned. So I'm glad that he's done that. He has done great work for freedom of speech. I do think his interventions into British politics are cack-handed some of the time. I think he's absolutely free to say whatever he wants about British politics. And I think any attempt to clamp down on him, which I'm sure is what Andy Burnham would like to do, would be wrong. But at the same time, if we're serious about changing this country, about solving the border crisis, the welfare crisis, the energy crisis, these huge crises that are afflicting our country in which neither the Tories nor Labour seem to have any answers for, if we're serious about that, we need to be serious about British politics and we need serious players.
Indeed. Well, Labour claim to be serious players now on the immigration front, Brendan, which is always an interesting one. Grab the popcorn for these moments. And Andy Burnham, the Prime Minister, went down. He wasn't just sitting there in the opulence of Chequers, which is, frankly, if I'd just become the Prime Minister, I'd be there every flipping day. Forget going back to my new Manchester office. I'd be in that beautiful house by the lake, fishing, enjoying the orchards, whatever. He went down to Dover, up to the coalface of the problem. And this is what he told us.
The number of crossings is down by 50% this year compared with the same period in 2025. And the month we've just had, July, has been the lowest number for 6 years. The number of crossings is down by 50% this year compared with the same period in 2025. And the month we've just had, July, has been the lowest number for 6 years of people crossing. So clearly progress is being made, but we're not complacent, and it's why I am here. So we're just going to be relentless. We have to deal with the issue rather than play politics with the issue. Just deal with it head on, grip it, and then make the changes that will bring that reassurance to the public. The public don't like the idea that the border looks like it's not controlled. We need to bring back that control, but also we need to offer support for people who genuinely need it. It's about changing the whole approach, and slowly but surely we are putting in place those building blocks of a very different approach to this issue. It's working, but there's more to be done.
Yeah, note to the Downing Street Media Department, get your Prime Minister a microphone where we can hear him properly. Brendan, so there it is, you know, Reform busted flush on this one now. Conservatives, Chris Philp can go and paddle in as many Calais waters as he likes. Andy Burnham solved the problem.
Yeah, we're not buying it, are we, really? And I think a lot of your listeners and viewers won't be buying it either. Look, I have to be fair to Andy Burnham, I'm glad he went down there. I'm glad he actually went to Dover, because when Farage used to go to Dover in the old days, I mean, he still does every now and then, but when he used to go there to film the boats and to talk about the boats, he was called a fascist, he was called far right. He'd be, you know, there'd be columns in The Guardian saying, who is this Nazi at Dover? I mean, it was seen as a really bad thing to do, to go down to the coastline and say, look at all these men, mostly men, from God knows where, coming into our country. That was seen as a bad thing to do. So I'm glad Andy Burnham has done it. He's been forced to do it. That's the truth of it. He's been forced to do it by the events in Ceuta in North Africa, where 60,000 men went from Morocco to Spanish territory. That has caused huge consternation in Europe, even amongst the kinds of government officials who didn't take this problem seriously for a long time. So he's been compelled to do it. His hand has been forced. But, you know, we have to get real about this. Since he came to power, which has only been a couple of weeks, more than 2,000 people have come illegally on small boats to this country. Yeah. This is a crisis.
Firstly, that's apparently a success, Brendan.
And he says it's getting better, but people aren't going to buy that. It's a security crisis because we don't know who these men are and we don't know what their intentions are. And we know that a lot of crimes have been committed by people from overseas who came here illegally. But also, it's a sovereignty crisis. A country that cannot protect its borders, that cannot stop hundreds of young men from turning up illegally every single week. That's not a serious country. That is not a properly sovereign country. So we now have to dismantle every single piece of legislation and international treaty and human rights law that prevents us from policing our borders, which is the right of every sovereign state.
Absolutely right. If you've got tens of thousands, I make this point constantly, it shouldn't matter whether you're left-wing, right-wing. Anyone with half a brain cell can see that this is completely unacceptable. And I would argue right now, you know, we know that what happened in Quetta, Nigel Farage talking about sending the Navy in to avoid those kind of problems, and maybe there's something in that. But the fact that this is not a massive story, it's only that it's on the, well, it used to be on the headlines every single day. Now, a couple of thousand a week hardly gets a mention. What we do know is that the French have been absolutely woeful in this. Front page of the Sun today, Le Rip-Off. Apparently, we hear that it's costing £8,000 per migrant that they stop coming to the UK. I mean, how did we get into this bonkers? It's the 21st century, for goodness sake. 2 countries, 2 leaders, 2 militaries, 2 police forces, 2 home secretaries between the 2 intelligence services, 2 lots of drones, 2 lots of navy, and we can't stop thousands of men crossing a piece of water on a rubber boat.
It's just surreal. I mean, it really is surreal. You know, Britain used to rule the waves, and now we can't even stop a couple of dinghies coming over every single day. It's pure madness. And I think the political class has just been so relaxed about it for so long, and the liberal media in particular, and the left and the activist class, they've all said it's not a problem, or they've said any attempt to stop it is racist and fascistic, and you're harming these vulnerable people from overseas. They've been gaslighting us. We can see with our own eyes that most of the people on these boats are not vulnerable people. They tend to be fighting age men. They tend to be pretty fit young men. You do find yourself wondering where the hell are the women and children. We also know that they are given bed and board when they come into this country, which the public is very angry about. And we know that some of them have committed terrible crimes while they've been here. So this is the reality, and it's not racist to say any of that. But it really does come down to the question of whether or not Britain is an independent sovereign nation. And if you are an independent sovereign nation, you should know who's crossing your borders or what is crossing your borders and for what purpose that is happening. If you don't know that, then you are not an independent nation, and that is currently the mess that we are in.
Absolutely right. And those boats, we also know, carry a contingent of Iranians, and the last time I looked, we are at war, tacitly or otherwise, with Iran. I mean, if ever there was a point where you might say, perhaps we should stop these people. I was talking to somebody who was telling me about a Finnish woman who's lived in the UK for 50 years that struggled like mad because she dared to go on holiday to get back into the UK because something popped up on a computer. She had her passport, her papers, everything. Lived here, kids here, grandkids, the whole thing, all her life, pretty much, other than 10 years, she's lived here and struggled for hours detained at Border Force. Or you could come from an iffy part of Iranian regime, jump in a boat, come to the UK and be in the Four Seasons by 6 o'clock.
Absolutely right. That's the problem. You know, Andy Burnham and others think that we can just go down to Dover and put a few more coppers down there and maybe put a few Navy ships in the channel and everything will be fine. No, the problem is the green light that we are implicitly sending to these illegal immigrants, because they know full well, they talk amongst themselves all the time.
Of course.
They know that when they come to Britain, they'll get a hotel room. They know they'll get 3 meals a day. They might get some medical assistance. They might get some pocket money. They probably won't be deported. We'd hardly deport anyone. They know all of this. Yeah. They know we are a soft touch. So we are basically saying, on the one hand, please don't come. We don't want you here. On the other hand, please do come because you're going to get all these freebies. Until we dismantle that entire soft regime and treat these illegal immigrants harshly and deport them quickly, until we do that, then we're not going to solve this problem.
Brendan, great to have you on. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer over there at Spiked. Thank you to him on this point. Chris is in Oxford. What have you got for us, Chris? Morning.
Good morning, Ian. Mikey and Whitney here. Can you guys at talkTV and Talk Radio, can you imagine how frustrating...
Oh. Thank you. That was Mike. That was a voice note, of course. I never got to hear it, Mike, because we were just wondering what happened. This is Chris in Oxford. Chris, how you doing?
Good morning. Not too bad, thank you.
Good. Fire away. What have you got?
Well, first of all, I am a Reform voter. Rupert Lowe is basically got another agenda. He wants to take over from Nigel. He used to be with Reform. He needs to be asked the question, why did he leave? Because Nigel has already exclaimed that most of the Reform people couldn't get on with him because he was shouting, he was loud, everything else. The other thing as well is Kemi Badenoch has taken up points that Nigel has already said about stopping and coming out of the ECHR. He's picking up on his points to make out the Conservatives is what they will do. I don't believe the Conservatives are genuine at all. I used to be a Conservative voter for years. Don't believe them at all, which is why I switched to Reform, because I believe what Nigel said.
Yeah.
The thing as well is Andy Burnham will not, like Nigel said, put the Navy out there to physically stop the boats and send them back. Now, have we got to wait for another 7/11 with, we know that Iranians are bringing people into the country?
Yeah, it's a joke. I mean, even if somebody was quite relaxed about people going into hotels and HMOs, even if you came from that part of the political spectrum, surely now, with what's going on in Iran, you might think, right, this is the point when we have to detain everybody that's come over on a boat because we don't know who they are. We know there's always been at one point, Iran was the majority, when this whole thing first started, it was almost majority Iranians that were legging it out of Tehran and trying to get to this country via various European routes. But now, there's still, of the 70%, Iran are part of that contingent. So if ever there was a point, you just use your common sense and say, we don't know who these blokes are. We're just going to detain them. We're not going to beat them up or put them in Pentonville, but we are going to detain them. That doesn't happen. Chris, great call. Thank you, mate, for that. 0344 499 1000. More from you on the way. Loads to talk about. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. Not just that the police have arrived at the Sandringham estate where Prince Andrew, as was now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is currently living since being thrown out of the Windsor estate. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation. And certainly what's been contained in the Epstein files was released in the last few weeks. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. Christine says, my road in Southend, just off the seafront, has at least 8 HMOs. The road used to be lovely. Now there's rubbish everywhere because the tenants don't care. It's disgusting. I'm a pensioner. I hate it, but I can't move because I'm adequately accommodated. This is what you get for working hard all your life. That's sunny Southend for you. And thank you for your other nice comments as well, Christine. That's very kind. Nobody should be in that situation. Nobody should be living in a... If you look at the progress of how people, you know, the old sort of images of Victorian Britain and what it looked like, and everywhere was a slum, and when there wasn't a slum, there was a gin house, so you were either off your face on something or you were living in such woeful accommodation. And, of course, you progress over the years, the big house building post-war, etc. Council houses for people. Those things were built beautifully. I lived in one all my childhood, and in 2 different ones, and they were just built to great levels as well. There was you couldn't put a screw in a wall in a council house back then because it would just damage the screw. The walls were properly, it was great. And then here we are in 2026, where people are living in conditions that are beginning to reflect what we had 100 years ago. Just because you've got heating and just because you've got running water doesn't mean everything's tickety-boo. That's really sad, regardless of what the reasons are for multiple HMOs, etc. Doesn't really matter. If people are disrespecting the area, which is clearly the case in some of those examples. I saw it when I used to live in East London. There were certain pockets and roads you'd go down, and it was like carnage. Where are we, for God's sake? This is awful. Anyway, on wider issues, let's speak to Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor. Morning to you, Paul.
Morning, how are you?
I'm good. Always good to have you with us. Always good to talk. It's a lovely sunny day. And, of course, normally, I said this to Brendan, our last guest, normally in August you can't find a news story for Love Nor Money. And yet we wake up this morning to this new debate on the right of politics. So it's interesting to get your perspective on this, that Rupert Lowe wants to get into bed, metaphorically, with Nigel Farage. Your thoughts?
Well, I think they're now sort of at a point of such different ideas and different traditions and enmities and rivalries that I can't really see how you can sort of reconcile the warring factions, really. It does remind me a little bit of the far left, you know, where you put 4 of them in a room and you get 5 factions.
Yeah.
And it just seems a similar idea that, like amoeba, these are sort of constantly separating and moving away from each other. So, I mean, as you identified, I'm a Labour person, that would terrify us, the idea that the right could unite the Conservatives, Restore and Reform into a huge voting bloc. Because that would see off any chance of a Labour government forever. But like I say, for the political reasons I described, I just don't see it happening.
And even from an outsider's perspective, whether somebody is on the left or whether they just don't vote anyway, they might be a Tory, Lib Dem, whatever. It does seem slightly odd that Rupert Lowe has sort of made this video, and he's obviously a very mesmeric character. He's got a great voice, and he could be voicing commercials with those tones. So he's got all of that going on. I'm sure he's a tremendous fella, and all the rest of it to have a pint with. It wouldn't be dull, put it that way. But he's put some red lines in this, which is quite an interesting thing to do, including getting rid of former Tories like Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick. Now, most people, I think, Reform was formed sort of out of the ashes, in some respects, of the Tory party. So Nigel Farage is a former Tory. Richard Tice is a former Tory. I mean, it seemed a curious position to take from Mr. Lowe to stipulate that, we could do business together, but you've got to get rid of that lot first.
Yeah, I mean, it is sectarian, isn't it? And then for me, as an observer, the big difference between Restore and Reform is that Reform has a boundary to its right over which it won't step. So it says no to people on the right of its political spectrum, whereas Restore doesn't, and will happily have anyone in if they sign up to Rupert Lowe's prospectus. And I think that's, shows you that Restore is far more extreme than Reform would place itself. Isn't it interesting, though, that in the by-election, in Greater Manchester, the one just gone, the mayoral election, Restore beat the Conservatives.
Yes.
And the Conservative Party we used to talk about as the most successful political party in Europe. You know, it bestrode the century, the 20th century, like a colossus, winning election after election, occasional Labour governments popping up for 4 or 5 years and then disappearing. And yet, you know, being beaten by this new political force, backed by Elon Musk, of course, so the money is there to do the political campaigning. But, I mean, that to me was a phenomenon. I mean, and if you were Kemi Badenoch waking up and looking at that, you'd say, well, yeah, fair enough, you know, it's Greater Manchester, it's not natural Conservative territory, perhaps, although, you know, not quite true. But to then be beaten by a party to your right.
Well, also, just to compound that point, Paul, I mean, it's only 2017 when the Conservatives got 22, nearly 23% of the vote at the mayoral election in Greater Manchester. This time they got 7%. It was previously a good democratic battle between Tories and Labour, the Lib Dems thrown into the mix as well. I'm sure you had a few sort of independents in there, but generally speaking, that's what it was. And now, as you rightly say, the fact that the Tories can be beaten by Restore, and I say this not to be disrespectful to people who vote Restore, but merely by dint of their newness on the block, as it were, plus Reform were there if you want a more right-wing party. I mean, terrible news for the Conservatives.
I mean, it throws up two other sort of big political points. One is, I think people shop around now. So you saw people voting Reform in the local elections and then voting Labour in the mayoral election just a few weeks later. So I don't think people see themselves necessarily as sort of left-wing or right-wing or kind of on a spectrum like that in quite the same way. And the other is that political parties have absolutely no right to exist if the conditions that gave birth to them cease to exist. So the Conservative Party doesn't have a right to exist any more than the Labour Party does. You know, the history books tell us that the Liberal Party was an enormous political force in Victorian times and then disappeared in the 20th century because its forces underpinning it were replaced by Labour. So it could be that the Conservative Party is on a downward spiral now to go the same way as the Liberal Party did, which is to be a tiny rump and no longer electorally viable.
But of course,
other parties emerge and take over. So I mean, like I say, it's not a given that these parties exist.
Well, indeed, but there could still be a massive danger for Labour here in that if you did put, the Conservatives with what they have left, and they got a Muller in 2024. The predictions, according to the polls, that if there was an election tomorrow, there'd be another slaughter that could halve what they got. So they're left with about 50 sort of Lib Dem territory. But if you put them in to some bracket with Reform and Restore, then that to some people, that's a powerhouse that would wipe the other parties, including Labour, off the map.
I mean, I think, well, two things on that. One is, I don't think Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe are ever going to get around a table and agree. I think their enmity between them now is biblical, and I just don't see how that's going to happen. Now, I'm talking about this big sweep of history, but actually it does come down to personalities as well, doesn't it, and individuals involved. And second is, if Labour fixes some of the things that underpin people's discontent, like the small boats, like the potholes, like the services locally not feeling like they're working for you, like housing, then there's no reason why people might be quite so disgruntled and want to go off and find something new. Labour can win the next election if it sorts out the bread and butter.
Listen, Paul, I've got to stop there for time. Thank you, Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor. One comes here from Steve, who says, if it wasn't for Nigel, Rupert wouldn't even be an MP. He stood under the Reform flag, then as quick as you like, switched to his own party. That's the word on the street from many of you in this respect. One here from Pam, who says, I'll come back to Pam's one in just a second, because it's about the Bath story, so very different territory. This one from, let's go to one from Chris. With regards to the question on why now to the Restore Reform offer of talks, could the potential of a snap election be driving this decision? Well, Zia Youssef joins us, Reform UK Shadow Home Secretary. Zia, morning to you. Well, here's a story that almost popped out of nowhere over the last 24 hours. Your take on this, then, Mr. Lowe, putting out an olive branch. I mean, to you of all people, I suppose.
Well, as Nigel said on Twitter yesterday evening, We're willing to talk to any political party who share our values. And, you know, we've been campaigning for these values a long time. I've dedicated my life to them. Nigel's dedicated decades of his life to them. We want secure borders. We've just announced, obviously, today we'll deploy His Majesty's Royal Navy in the Channel to make sure no illegal boat makes it to our shores. We want the mass deportation of all illegal migrants already in Britain, well north of 1 million people there. We want law and order to be upheld. We want taxes to come down. You know, these are the things that we're fighting for. And look, we're fighting to win, because one thing I know enough about British history to know coalition governments achieve absolutely nothing of any value. Nobody gets what they hoped for or wanted. There's only one party. There's only one party with a real chance of a majority. And under our first past the post system, on the right, sorry, one party with a chance of winning on the right. That is Reform. We don't take anyone's vote for granted. We know we've got to work incredibly hard. We'll keep doing it to earn the vote of everybody who in this country who shares the values that I just spoke about.
So, and that would include Rupert Lowe, I would assume.
Yeah, as Nigel said yesterday, we're open to speaking to anybody who shares those values. We're open to talking to other parties. But of course, you know, look, in the end, in order for us to turn this great country around, we need everybody, as I said, who shares those values, who wants us to actually have a border, who thinks that immigration law should be upheld, who thinks that if you came here illegally, you should never be allowed to stay, let alone get taxpayer funded life, you know, basically for the rest of your life. And in that spirit, yeah, we want. So
is that a firm yes to Rupert Lowe? You are happy to get into some kind of pact with him?
Well, again, so specifically rather pact, as I said, a coalition government, right, which is what you would then be talking about. If you're talking about, that's what you're talking about. History shows, whether you look at the Lib Dems and the Tory, you know, any of those in history, nobody gets what they want.
But wouldn't it be emerging here? Would it not be? I mean, if this was pre-election, would this not be emerging? So Restore would no longer exist, and Rupert would sit round the table. You'd be breaking bread, laughing about that moment with the cops, and oh God, what fun we had back in the day when we hated each other, and we're all mates again. Can you see that happening?
Well, look. The first point to make is that it's unclear that that's what it wasn't clear to me that that's what we were talking about. I think he was talking about a cooperation of some kind. And again, that's the point I would make. You know, we've come into politics under a first past the post system. You need to win a majority. Coalitions, i.e. cooperations in government, they achieve absolutely nothing. There is one party that has a real chance of winning a majority on the right in this country. We're going to fight to win. We'd encourage everybody who shares the values that I talked about, who want mass deportations, who want a secure border, who want law and order, who want British people to come first, to get behind Reform. But having said that, as Nigel said, of course we're willing to engage and talk to people from other parties, and that would include Rupert, yeah.
Would the door be open for him? And I'm not just sort of hammering the point for the sake of it, but it is, unfortunately, centre to this kind of almost conundrum that's been thrown up at the weekend, because there's a lot of areas that you can tuck into on this. Would the door be open by Reform for Rupert Lowe to rejoin the party, if that is what it would take? Could you imagine? I mean, you had an almighty fallout. We know that, you know, you were sort of centred to this row. Could you forgive and sit down and have a cup of tea with Rupert Lowe?
Well, if you're asking, so two different points there, right? If you're asking me, look, I'm open to whatever's in the best interest of the country. That's why I got in to politics. So that would be the first point. The second point would be the only person who can answer that specific question is the leader of our party, because that would be Nigel. So I suggest you put that to him.
No, that's fair. Would you be comfortable, though, with Rupert Lowe back around?
Listen, I got into politics. What matters is not my level of comfort. What matters is what's in the interests of the country. What is in the interests of the tens of millions of people in this country who can see the Britain we grew up in, the Britain we love, slipping away from us very, very quickly. That's what matters.
OK. I was going to say, maybe all of this is now academic, because over the weekend, and Zira could hardly believe this was happening, Andy Burnham went to Dover and spoke about immigration. I mean, who would have thought it? Because he'd said absolutely nada on this for the last couple of weeks, and I was beginning to wonder whether he even knew there was a problem. And what he's done, he's scooped it all up. He's now owned the conversation. He's going to be relentless, so you can stand down your Navy boats. There won't be any need for it, because Andy Burnham, a Labour Prime Minister, Zia Youssef, has solved the problem. What do you say?
Yeah, he just strikes me as sort of a new supply teacher who arrives in a classroom and just thinks, if everyone just holds hands and sings Kumbaya, and he sort of and he does some videos about bread and fruit and things to sort of, claim he's on people's side. Look, he's definitely a better communicator than Keir Starmer. That's for sure. I think, he definitely did some things as mayor that people like, clearly. Otherwise, he wouldn't command the support that he does, particularly in the north. But here's what's clear about Andy Burnham. I do not think, I see no evidence, someone who ran a company, for example, that he is going to be a high-functioning executive. And the scale of the challenge, you look about the small boats crisis.
Yeah.
The fact that we are now talking about official policy being deploying the military to say, no, not a single illegal boat makes it to our shores, and we will be met by our Royal Marines every single time if you try to do it, and we'll take them back to France, demonstrates how difficult this problem has been. There's a reason why the Tories and Labour refused to solve the problem. There's no evidence that Andy Burnham will. So what he's done is he's gone to Dover, because he's a content creator at the moment, as much as he's a Prime Minister, probably more so a content creator. So he's trying to show he cares about the problem. Let's see what happens. I am not seeing any evidence that he's doing anything different to previous Labour and Tory governments who have just made this problem worse.
And from what I can gather as well, he's talking about sort of opening safer routes and legal and all this kind of stuff, which is, frankly, it's that kind of talk that got the two previous main parties into this bother in the first place by not identifying what people are looking for and what the appetite is for real, robust change.
It's ridiculous. It's like saying, I know that there are lots of, random men turning up in your house and breaking in through the windows, but good news, we've now unlocked the door so they can just come in through there. Your windows will be fine. It's a complete nonsense. People don't want to hear about safe and legal routes for people from other countries. What they want is safety and legality for British people. And, one of the reasons we've announced this policy to use the Navy and use our armed forces to defend our borders is not only because north of 200,000 have arrived illegally over the last 8 years, but also because some have gone on to brutally and savagely murder British people. Some have gone on to attempt mass casualty terrorist attacks. This country, we are full. Our public services are buckling and collapsing. And for him to think that what people want is, fine, stop the boats, but just let them all come in legally, again demonstrates why I actually think his support right now is probably as high as it'll be. And I think it'll start to fall as people realise he's not going to be any different to Starmer in terms of his delivery.
Zia, thank you for your time this morning. Enjoy your day. Thank you. Zia Youssef, he's the Reform UK Shadow Home Secretary. Thoughts on what you heard there? 0344 499 1000. Wasn't really ruling out sort of pact status or having new voices in the party. I would sense that Rupert Lowe is not on his Christmas card list, but he understands the urgency of the situation. Your response to that as well. Our lines are open. This is Talk. Let's get a voice note firstly, though. On that Reform Pact, this comes from Tristan. Morning, Tristan.
I'm actually a Reform and a Restore supporter, to be honest with you. And, it's the only option, to be honest with you. Otherwise, I think there's a very good chance we could have a scary left-wing coalition, to be honest with you, which doesn't bear thinking about. So this is the only option. So I'm pleased what Rupert has done. I don't know if Nigel's going to be happy with it, but, it is the only option, to be honest with you. It really is.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome. It's the home of common sense. Can I just bring... We were talking... there was the story, and this was the light-hearted part of the day, of 1 in 10 Brits haven't taken a bath in more than a decade, according to research. And naturally, it kind of spawned debates about bath versus shower. The era of the sort of 70s and even the 80s, where not many people had a shower. Certainly, if you lived in a council house, you probably didn't have a shower. You might have retrofitted one, which most will have done by now. And then we got into washing machines and what they used to look like. They were the twin tub, and the fact you had to attach a little hose to it, attach to the pipe, and the kitchen would flood. How we used to live. Pete in Southend says, in the late 90s, we tried a single tub with a separate spin dryer, same water, so darkest or dirtiest left till last. Left the bathroom floor sopping wet. That was the problem. Thank you for that, Pete. Pam says, I had a twin tub when we got married in 1969. I did the washing on a Friday night and I swear flooded the floor every single time when the hot water hose went limp and slithered out of the twin tub and onto... Slithered it did. And onto the floor. That's how we used to ride. The twin tub thing looked like an incredible piece of engineering at the time. It was just a nice little unit with 2 doors on the top. What could go wrong? Flooding. That's what could go wrong. Nigel is in Edinburgh. Nigel, what have you got for us? Morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Just heard actually on X that Richard Tice has ruled out any pact with Rupert Lowe and Restore. I don't know if that's true or not, but in which case I don't see any future for Reform winning the next election. Rupert Lowe was the absolute obvious Home Secretary in waiting, and from the moment he was ejected, Reform's polling has drifted. They now drifted so low.
You would put that... I mean, they still, even after Rupert Lowe had gone, they were still topping the polls as the party to likely win the next election.
They were, but they weren't increasing. They were increasing up to that point, and they didn't increase after it. They only slowly drifted down, and they're now drifting further. Unless they deal with that rift, and when it happened, I emailed Nigel Farage, who I was highly supportive of, and I said, you've got a KC involved, get everyone around the table, get a YouTube live event, get everyone questioned, yourself, Zia Yusuf, Rupert Lowe, and let us, the members, and I was a member then, see who is right and who is wrong, because we still have this. Half the people ringing you up saying Rupert Lowe is a nutcase, half of the people ringing you up saying Rupert Lowe and Reform need to get back together.
Yeah.
Now, we don't actually know what the truth is. My own personal opinion is that the party has been on the decline ever since Nigel Farage introduced Zia Yusuf, which he effectively did as his leader in waiting. And from that moment, it went down. And I said at the time, Zia Yusuf speaks perfectly well, but there's something about him I'm not content with.
Okay.
And from that moment, they seem to have been in trouble.
So you would, based on everything you just said, you would welcome some kind of arrangement between the two?
I think without it, there is no future. The moment Rupert left is when they lost the next election. And unless they restore that...
Was Rupert Lowe really that powerful?
Sorry,
was Rupert Lowe really that pivotal and powerful?
Yes, I think he was. And I think what he speaks for is what an awful lot of us in the country want. And what Restore has done, don't forget there are 140,000 plus members. I don't know how many there are of Restore. I'm a member. I was a member of Reform. And most of those 140,000, not all of them, will have been disaffected Reform members. A lot of them are new members. But what Restore is appealing to and what Rupert is appealing to is the roughly 40%, 50% of the population never vote because they've never felt a politician is worth voting for. And they do believe Rupert is worth voting for. And if you listen to the broadcast he put out when he launched Restore as a political party, It was exceptionally well delivered. If you shut your eyes, you almost were listening to Churchill. He had a brilliant delivery.
He's got a great voice. OK, I hear you. Listen, and there is an appetite for that. Nigel in Edinburgh, thank you very much indeed. Let's remind ourselves, by the way, so this has all happened over the weekend. Rupert Lowe has put out this, I don't know whether olive branch is the right idea, but a suggestion that the parties work together. He's put some red lines in there. There's not really... I mean, Nigel Farage has written a response on X, which sort of covers the fact that, yes, we welcome different voices. Would that ever extend to getting... I don't think you could have Zia Youssef and Rupert Lowe in the same party, if I'm brutally honest. I genuinely don't think that could happen. Let's remind ourselves, however, what Nigel Farage said about Rupert Lowe. This is only from June. Have a listen.
He's a very vengeful man. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I have to say, this idea that I fell out with him, no, I didn't fall out with him. Everyone fell out with him. I mean, you know, Lee Anderson, you know, ex-miner, is pretty rough and tough and can take anything you throw at him. You probably throw it back knowing Lee, but even Lee said, I just can't deal with this person. You know, and we had to put up every week with the ranting, the raving, the shouting, the threats, the libel actions. There are some people, however emollient you try and be in return, that you simply can't deal with.
You simply can't deal with. Andrew in Hertfordshire, what do you make of it all? Morning to you.
Good morning, Ian. Nice to see you up bright and early.
Yeah, a bit of a shocker.
Yeah, so early bird person myself, driving to Norfolk one day, listened to Times Radio, and they had a pollster from America on there.
Sorry?
And exactly, and he said that the reason Trump won was that people that had never voted for him, and that was the big swing. And you heard Reform. What he said was very straightforward. People that hadn't voted, and so if you want to win Reform, you must work with Rupert. And in government, there'll be people that you can't work with. Within your work environment, there are people that...
Why do you have to work with Rupert, though? Well, I mean, if you fundamentally disagree with some of what he's saying, or the general thrust, then why would they want to work with him?
Because it would show leadership, it would show political skills, and if they don't do it, they'll lose. They cannot win from this position because the right is split. And if you look at Burnham, he's brought back Diane Abbott. Jeremy Corbyn will come back. What he's doing is he's bringing back the people that bring back votes.
But would you not be better getting into bed with the Conservatives on that basis? Because they've got much more support and many more MPs, actual MPs.
Yeah. So what Reform bring is people that haven't voted, that don't vote, and the Conservatives do that. If they were grown-ups, they would all sit down and they'd resolve it.
Well, they should do. I hear you. Listen, I've got to step in at that point, Andrew, for no other reason. We've hit the clock. This is Talk.
.49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
Secretary has brought forward a very rigorous plan in relation to this, and let's remember, of course, the numbers can fluctuate, but overall boat crossings are down quite significantly year on year, so that does suggest that the plan is working.
We've just witnessed drone footage of the French authorities handing out life jackets to illegal immigrants and then waving them goodbye as they head on their way towards the UK. So the French are actively helping and facilitating illegal immigration. In addition to that, the French forces did nothing to stop that huge migrant dinghy. In fact, the dinghy came out, then it went back to the beach to pick up even more illegal immigrants and then departed for a second time. During all of that, the French did nothing, and they even handed out life jackets and waved goodbye as these illegal immigrants head towards the UK. I think that's terrible. I mean that anyone who did cross the channel and arrive in Dover could be immediately deported within around about a week.
Wait a second, he's just dragging a line by the look of it.
Is that a warning shot towards us? I don't know.
Well, I was trying to work
Okay. The French officers could clearly see we were conducting an interview on the back of the fishing boat. They sailed extremely close to us and started firing gunshots, 11 live rounds. We could see the bullets hitting the water behind our boat. They weren't firing before their approach. They weren't firing afterwards. There was no notification of any kind of training exercise. So it did seem to me to be an effort to intimidate us.
The thing that I find, and I should say alarm clock Brits find so frustrating, Chris, and this is why I wanted you on this morning. Yesterday, finally, the unelected Messiah of Manchester stood up and said to consummate fury from most of us that Labour's plan to stop dinghy migrants is working. This, Chris, despite the fact that 1,000 illegal migrants have still come into this country in the last 9 days since he became Prime Minister.
Je suis un député dans le Parlement du Royaume-Uni. Why have you allowed the migrants into the water? Why haven't you stopped them?
Our order is to let them go like that.
Your order is to let them go?
We just have to say to them, don't do that, it's dangerous.
So your orders are not to intervene?
We have to protect them.
Well, there's also protecting the border as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, morning. Coming up, it's 3 minutes after 9 o'clock. Welcome along. Monday, 3rd of August, Ian Collins in for Jeremy Carl for the next couple of weeks. Top of the list, and it's a big one this morning. I mean, there's probably a whole week of debate in this, and maybe more. Rupert Lowe holding out what some are describing as a bit of an olive branch to Nigel Farage. Let's partner up and get this thing done is the central message. It does come with caveats and a few red lines. However, if you're a Reform voter, how do you feel about that? And if you're a Restore voter, and Restore voters have not been kind to, as you heard from our previous caller, not been kind to Nigel Farage and his party. More details on that. We'll speak to all sorts of voices on this. Trevor Kavanagh with us in just a few moments' time. Now, yesterday, Andy Burnham broke cover, decided to finally talk about immigration. He's not said a word about this in the last couple of weeks. He didn't just discuss it, he went to Dover. How good is Andy Burnham? He's not messing around over there enjoying the trappings of opulence at Chequers. Oh, no, down at the White Cliffs, giving it large, a true man at the coalface of the story. He reckons, he says, and I quote, his government will be relentless in curbing the number of people arriving in the UK in small boats. I just remind him that since he's been Prime Minister, which was about 20 minutes ago. 2,000 people. Just let that settle for a second. We see these numbers, they're so big, we see them all the time, we just kind of gloss over them. 2,000 people have come into this country uninvited, illegally, on small rubber boats from Calais. What is going on? And elsewhere, but fully connected to the ineptitude of our political masters at Westminster, more than 1,500 convicted foreign criminals are still living in taxpayer-funded asylum accommodation because they've not yet been deported. The lawyers get involved, you see. They smell chicken nugget stories and the right to a family life. Oh, yes. It's still a problem. Is there no end to this insanity? Details to come. Oh, by the way, the drought we're suffering could lead to food shortages. Are you at the moment starving? 0344 499 1000. This comes in from Trevor in Peterborough. He says, I'm 60 years old. I voted for the first time in 2016 for Brexit. I'd never voted before because all three parties talk the talk and deliver the opposite. When push comes to shove, I'll be voting Restore Britain, says Trevor in Peterborough. Dan in Epsom, on a separate point, back to bathtubs. Yes, we are talking bathtubs. There is a reason. Keep listening. All council houses had a bath only in SE21, that's South East London. But my nan had a rubber nozzle that would go over the taps and create a rubber shower. We had one of those as well. I think you had to buy it from the catalogue lady because she'd come round once a week with the K's catalogue. This was amazing, particularly at Christmas, of course, when you dive into all those toy pages at the back whilst sort of just glossing over that underwear bit. Ooh, knickers. And then you'd see what was every 14-year-old's is the nearest you got. There was no Pornhub back then, believe me. The nearest you got, is it too early? It's only 6 minutes after 9. So you got back to the catalogue, you ordered the rubber hose thing, or I think maybe Argos, or what was the one before Argos? Was it Littlewoods? Was that a shop or one of those places? CNA? You go to one of those places and buy a rubber shower, which was essentially a hose pipe with a nozzle on the end. You might as well have bought a bloody watering can, frankly. Probably got a better result. So we had one of these things. You had to stuff it on the taps. It didn't quite fit the taps and it slid off, but it felt like you were having a shower. I feel quite sorry for us looking back on it. These were very simple days. My mate round the corner, because there was the council estate that we were on and then there was the kind of private estate up the road, they had a shower. I mean, I couldn't believe the first time I went for, over to theirs for a play, go into the bathroom and it had a flipping shower in it. I thought I was in a palace. I couldn't believe it. Got a proper working shower. Unbelievable. We had nothing like that. And then eventually when the shower did arrive, and my dad came home one day with a shower, I mean, he might as well have brought home a nuclear reactor. The reaction in the house was so big. Wow, we're about to get with it. We're about to have a shower. So it certainly wasn't normal, as Dan has just brilliantly articulated. A little bit of breaking news. The FA is to send a letter withdrawing support for Gianni Infantino's re-election as FIFA president, following a similar move by Wales. This man is toast. He's not fit to govern. He's not fit to be part of FIFA. He was pivotal to the red card moment over America. He was obviously a man who was looking to the city rather than to footballing minds to run FIFA. We don't want people like that running the game. He's got no right to be in it, and I reckon he'll walk the plank probably by the end of the week, at least. Trevor Kavanagh joins us, former political editor at The Sun. Not to talk about football, Trevor, but to talk about politics, and there's a lot of it around today. I've said this to every guest, and good morning, by the way. I've said this to every guest this morning. Normally we get to August, and you know what it's like. You either go, as a journalist, you either go on holiday or you just sort of scramble around, or that story that sat in the drawer for a couple of weeks, and you think, no, all right, I'll give it some... I'll give it some exposure. There's nothing around, and today we get this incredible story from Rupert Lowe, which affects, of course, reform, because he's essentially made a video recording saying that he would quite like to join forces with Nigel Farage. I think we should just, before we speak, Trevor, can we just remind ourselves of Rupert Lowe and what he said? This is just a snippet from that video.
So, Nigel, my message is simple. If you are prepared to work together around serious policies, serious reform, and serious government, then so are we. Not because it's politically convenient for Restore Britain, not because it's personally easy, but millions and millions of British people deserve a patriotic government that puts our national interest before any personal differences that you and I may have.
Well, it's very personal, Trevor, that any personal differences we may have, put them to one side. Let's get this thing on the road.
Yes, I think you're right, Ian. The silly season, as we call it, has suddenly become serious.
Yeah.
And I think we're back on real politics. Rupert Lowe is not making an attempt to establish a partnership. It's a reverse takeover. And he's sniffed the weakness of Nigel Farage and Reform at this particular point in time. And he's gone for the jugular. There's no way that the sort of demands he's making, although some of them the broad general public and Reform voter might welcome, are going to be accepted by Nigel Farage, not least the ejection of those Tory defectors that have caused so many problems for the party.
It's going to be difficult because, as you rightly say, he's put these sort of red lines down. You know, you've got to kick out Suella Braverman, Robert Jenrick, and that's kind of curious that even at this stage of holding out this supposed olive, but we can work together. But to put a red line out that you've got to sort of essentially fire, you know, at least two of your current MPs is a bit strange.
Yes, I mean, they're impossible lines to cross too. But they have actually brought to the front line of British politics at the moment the issue that dominates everyone's thinking, either publicly or privately or quietly. Behind the scenes, it's mass immigration and those boats coming across the channel relentlessly, day after day after day, crammed with people we don't know and probably don't want, and who may end up being a real problem for this country, and I think already are.
In terms of Nigel Farage's response, Trevor, you would have seen this, but broadly speaking, he says that he wants to deliver change. To deliver that change, I understand Reform UK will need to support the support of other people from other parties, as well as millions who've never voted before. This is the broad coalition I'm trying to build, he says. He doesn't name-check Rupert Lowe or specifically Restore Britain. What do you make of his reply?
Well, I think those are the remarks of a man in a position of weakness, and I think that Nigel Farage has seen a disastrous slump in both his personal ratings and the ratings of Reform itself. I mean, they are riding so high only a year ago that we thought they would sweep everything before them. We were talking about him or his party beating Andy Burnham in Makerfield and in the mayoralty elections. And none of them have taken place, and none of the by-elections have turned out to be Reform victories that we've seen recently. So he's really on the back foot, and it's all because of this problem of dodgy supporters, the money that isn't fully explained. Very large chunks of money tied up with cryptocurrency and rather strange young men who seem to have their hands on vast amounts of cash. And so this, I think, has finally eroded the almost unassailable lead of Farage in the public mind.
I've got in trouble with some listeners because I've talked about there being a Reform wobble, and I think that's me being quite polite. And in fact, I've got more people who've attacked me for understating a story by using the word wobble. Never used the word wane, as some people suggested I did, but the word wobble. But it has been a bit of a wobble, even if it's an internal one. I know the polling has been more favourable to Andy Burnham in the last couple of weeks, but there's no doubt about it. Certainly internally in Reform and sort of associated areas, they've had a good run for the last year and nearly 2 years, of course, and riding high in the polls. No doubt about it. They've hit a bit of rough road, as it were. Is it surmountable, though, Trevor? Can Reform, you know, like all parties, they go through these periods and then they come out the other end. What is your sense of Reform going forward now?
Well, I've already nailed my colours to the mast on this. When the Sunday Times revealed all the stories about Posh George, this 30-something guy who's a cryptocurrency dealer, a convicted fraudster, a man who's prepared to lose millions of pounds at the casino tables, and yet somehow in his early 30s is funding the lifestyle of Nigel Farage. Once that story broke, I said that's the end of Nigel Farage's dominance of the whole debate on the right wing of the party. And I think that what with the rise of Kemi Badenoch as a credible alternative, I think she's building a real, genuine platform on policy-based issues, which the public is responding to. I think suddenly you've got an alternative to the reform, and it isn't Restore. I mean, Restore is, I think, nakedly populist. And what it's saying and doing and calling for in terms of sending these boat people back to France is incredibly appealing to those who have watched over the last few years helplessly on their television as the governments of the day, one after another, have failed dismally to stop a single one of them or to send a single one of them back. And I think that that is an issue which is right for the sort of thing that Restore is now calling for. And Zia Yusuf of the Reform is actually taken by the horns and saying he will dump them back on the beaches of France. Well, a lot of people will cheer from the sidelines on that, and it may give a bounce to that particular portion of the political spectrum. But there's a lot of work to go through before they can actually say, this is how we'll do it.
In terms of, I mean, that point of immigration it's so pivotal to certainly voters on the centre-right to get this thing sorted. The Tories, Trevor, of course, will always suffer from this hangover from the previous administration. I appreciate that lots of Conservatives, even those that join Reform, will say, well, you know, it was collective responsibility. We didn't all believe this stuff. Kemi Badenoch could make the same point. Chris Philps seemed to be doing quite a lot of good work on the channel, highlighting the problems. I get all of that, but is it just too late for the Tories on this? Whatever way you slice it, Reform will always have the upper hand on the issue of immigration. They're now talking about bringing the Navy in.
Yes, I think that they'll have a big resonance with a lot of people. The problem with Nigel is that while people respond very favourably to him personally and to the things he calls for, including everything from UKIP onwards, leaving the European Union and now immigration. He himself has a slight question mark over him, even his most devoted supporters. And I know some of them who still keep in touch with me share the opinion that he is a person who is a one-man party, and without him, Reform almost evaporates before your eyes. I mean, a nice man though he is, Richard Tice doesn't strike me as a national leader. Zia Yusuf is just not quite the sort of person who's going to galvanise the British public. And in the space that leaves, people like Kemi Badenoch, who have got other policies apart from immigration, things like stamp duty and student fees and many, many other things to do with the economy, industry, prosperity and employment, I think is beginning to fill in the gap. And depending on when the election is, if there's a bit of time for her to develop and build that, I think she's going to be the person to look at for an anti-Burnham, anti-Labour vote.
Well, we're going to watch with interest. Just a final point on this, Trevor, because this story isn't going away, of course, and feeding into perhaps the call for common sense that I think British people are asking for in all sorts of areas of life. You don't want police officers turning up at your door and knocking the place down because of something you wrote on Facebook. And similarly, we don't want people released early from jail because they're dangerous, and the police are now warning that early release will lead to patrol cuts as well. Again, we saw Kemi Badenoch really steal this one last week when she talked about, you know, even reconvening Parliament to address the early release scheme. When senior police officers speak out, for police chiefs, we should take that seriously, of course. What do you make of this?
Well, I'm not sure that people do take police chiefs seriously anymore these days.
Well, there is that.
They make a complete hash of almost everything. And when you start by saying that they're not going to police shoplifting, they don't do anything about tracing phone snatchers or bike thieves or drug peddlers. You know, they've given up the ghost, and there's very little point in the minds of many voters to the police at all. They want to see, you know, it leads to this story about the petrol station thieves who have taken thousands of, hundreds of thousands of gallons of petrol and not paid for it. This is the broken Britain that we have to put up with, and it is not just Labour who inherited this from the Tories. It is the Tories and the Liberal Democrats who have let us all down, and that's the big mountain that Kemi Badenoch has to climb. It was Boris Johnson who gave the approval to a million new migrants. He's blaming the civil service, and it's true that this is the enemy within. This is the battle that any government of the future is going to have to fight. It is the entrenched left-wing, assertive, we know best public sector, which ranges right through our schools, our universities, our public service, and indeed through the BBC. And until a government comes in which begins to tackle all of that political correctness, we haven't got a prayer.
And on that point, Trevor, great to have you on as ever. Thank you, Trevor Kavanagh. He is, of course, columnist, former political editor at The Sun. Thank you to him. Paul in Belfast says if Lowe was serious, he would have done this in private. It's a pure stunt. The red lines, Kelly says he didn't actually say he's got to sack Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman. He didn't need to actually say it. That is the implication of it. You can't say to a party, yes, you can. Let's join forces, but any former Tory cabinet minister will never be a cabinet minister in my... That's as good as firing. That's a request. You think Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick are there to sit on the back benches for the rest of their lives? No, both of them have their eyes on big jobs in a future reform government. Big jobs. So to appease and placate the specifics of what Rupert Lowe said, that would involve firing as good as telling those people, right, you can be in the party, but you will never be in the cabinet. You think Braverman and Jenrick are going to hang around with that? Not in a million years. He's asking them to go. End of story. So whilst Kelly is correct, he didn't say sack them. He just said don't really promote them or employ them in any meaningful way. Just keep them languishing on the back benches. That's not an appeasing deal. That's not a compromise. That's a heavy stipulation that can't really be met, if at all. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a voice note on the Reform Restore Pact suggestion. This comes from Ian. Morning, Ian.
Morning, Ian. Ian from Hemel Hempstead. Firstly, I've got to say you're filling Jez's shoes admirably. Well done. Great start to the week. This thing about Lowe and Farage, I think the danger is if they were to come together for any election, and I can't see it because from what I can make out, they don't like each other very much, then both of those parties would lose voters because there are voters in each party that don't like the other party. I think the best option is for them to stay separate, harvest all their individual votes, and then after an election, look to see whether a coalition is the way forward.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCounts.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Suits, that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beard, and I feel
raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of this desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, fucking isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. One here says, Trevor Kavanagh, how many people no longer buy the Sun newspaper or come to that any newspaper? We don't pay any attention to your opinions, we just ignore you. Please, no more with this crap first thing in the morning. OK. Well, there is such a thing as people who are quite informed about the... I mean, I don't know how we would legislate for that, because you'd have to say, right, people who work in and around Westminster journalistically, who talk to the central players, who know the story, who can see how one area interlinks with another area, their journalists are no longer needed, but Bob in Arbroath with his Twitter feed is where we get our news. Or you can talk, you can listen to Trevor. You don't have to agree with Trevor, by the way. You don't have to agree with anybody who works in journalism. But the idea that we would somehow dismiss all parties that are qualified in that specific area would be interesting. I would add, if it's helpful to TYY on X, that read a cross-section of people. You know, sort of the left wings and the right wings and somewhere in between. If you want to kind of strengthen and broaden your spectrum of information, then do it that way. But I wouldn't dismiss people who have a qualified voice and an experience of the system, the peaks, the troughs, the bear traps, the central players, the behind-the-scenes character, and how all this stuff works. I mean, I think, look, you may say I'm bound to say that because I'm a journalist in the media myself. It would just be bonkers, wouldn't it? It would just ignore everyone and go to Twitter. Let's get it, Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor, somebody I would never, ever ignore, otherwise I'd get a stern message from her. Isabel, morning to you.
Well, I hope whoever it was that thought that someone like Trevor Kavanagh isn't worth listening to, yes. Just reflects on the points that you've made, which is, you know, there are those of us that have been around the politicians that we're talking about for many, many years. I mean, Trevor has been around for decades. I've done 2 decades myself. And in a sense, there's no substitute for actually knowing the personalities and how they work, which is why I think I definitely am qualified to talk to you this morning about the story that's obviously dominating the show, which is this Rupert Lowe so-called olive branch type thing. You know, because I do know the personalities involved and how all of this stuff works, or I'm afraid in this case won't work.
Indeed. And just a final point on the previous message. Of course, you don't have to agree with somebody. What people usually mean when they say, ignore that person, is they just usually mean I just disagree with them. You know, I'm not big on Polly Toynbee, but, you know, frankly, you know, I don't dispute that she can write a column, and on occasions they might be worth a look at. I mean, rarely, fair enough, but you take my point.
Exactly. It's just good to hear from different perspectives.
Correct.
I heard Paul Richards on your show earlier. I could agree with a few of things. You know, he was a Labour special advisor long ago when I was political editor of the Sunday Times, and he's got expertise on how governments work, how prime ministers work, and so on. So, yeah, there we go. That's my plea for an audience.
Absolutely right. Yeah, good cross-section of views. Nothing wrong with that. And the more qualified, obviously, the better. So this pact, is packed olive branch, is it a pact? Well, I couldn't quite work out fully what Rupert Lowe's point was to start with. It sounded really simple when you sort of dive in a little bit. There's some nuances and some complexities in there as well. Your thoughts?
Well, I want to say something a little bit positive and constructive first, which is that, I mean, personally, I agree with most of the conditions he laid down. I agree with most of his points about the state of our borders, the need for very, very large scale deportations, the need to reassert our British values, the need to reinforce Christianity. These are things that so many reform supporters can get behind. And there, I don't agree at all on the death penalty. I don't really like the idea of a referendum on that, but I don't think that in itself would be a deal breaker. The issue here, I'm afraid, is once again one of personalities. Rupert, I admire the fact that he's built this party from nothing. It's a really, really difficult thing to do. And why I think we are where we are with this offer, and I think it's a phony one, by the way, and we can come to why it's obvious to me it's a phony one, is because he is not actually, despite what it might look like, he's not actually talking from a position of strength right now. He's done really well, and I don't mean that in a patronising way, genuinely has done incredibly well to build a party from nothing to where it's polling quite significantly. And that is a challenge for reform, without a doubt. But I think we are where we are because he is now bumping up against something I warned about right from the start, which is it's incredibly difficult to turn something from being a kind of agent provocateur, from being a party that ruffles feathers, to something that is a full-scale national political force. And whilst it looks like Restore is that, and it might numerically be that when pollsters ask whether people support Restore, the difficulty that Rupert will be finding is actually getting candidates to stand and to run in local elections. He's got a year in which to find thousands of candidates. And that is a huge kind of operational challenge, not to mention the vetting, which I think will be, Reform has had plenty of well-documented problems with vetting. Restore will have at least as many, probably times two, because it does attract a certain type of character. And party leaders can't control who's attracted to them at all times. So again, that's not a criticism of him. But that's what I think he's up against. I think he's realizing that actually the mechanics of building a party are really very complex and time consuming and incredibly expensive. And people talk about how Elon Musk supports Restore. I don't believe that Rupert Lowe has reported any donations from Elon Musk so far through the Electoral Commission. I haven't looked at that myself, but I understand, as far as I know, there are no donations reported. So is this financial support? Has it ever come through? What form is it taking? Does Rupert Lowe have the money to match his ambitions? So that's where I think he's coming from. And here's the other thing. I think that he has significant links with the Tory hierarchy. I think the Tory hierarchy, the Tory elements within the party leadership in the Tories have thought that Rupert Lowe is pretty useful in taking a chunk of votes off Reform and have been playing along with him. And I think that the Manchester mayoral result, which is a good one for Restore, has perhaps rattled the Tories that were doing business with Rupert, and there has been a fallout there. I think there's a fair bit may come out about this in coming days or weeks. And so he's on his own. And that's why I think that he is making this offer, not from a position of strength, but from a position of pragmatism. He also knows it's not going to happen. Why? Because he and Nigel just really, really heartily dislike each other. You interviewed Zia earlier. There's obviously a very bad blood there. Yep. Zia generously said he'd do what was in the interests of the country. It's just not going to happen. It's not workable. I'm sorry. Things do come down to personalities in politics.
Absolutely.
And these personalities just can't do this.
And these were, they weren't more than a little bit of a bit of an office riff. These run deep, of course. These disagreements between the central players in reform and with Rupert Lowe. So I simply can't see how they could, break bread in any form. Just a word, if you would, though, Isabel, on what you were saying about the Tories, because I keep hearing this, and I've spoken to people myself who've kind of shone a little bit of a light onto this. There is a bit of a conversation going between Rupert Lowe and the Conservatives. I can see why that might work in terms of damaging reform, and therefore the chief beneficiaries could be the Conservatives. But everything else Rupert Lowe talks about isn't very Kemi Badenoch-like. So how is that working?
Well, I don't think it is working, and that may be why...
Or how is it meant to work?
I don't know precisely. There's a lot of digging to be done here, but I understand that there are a number of characters on the Tory side have been meeting Rupert Lowe in a secret setting. I know where and what that is, but I'm not going to say it here because I don't want to just spout stuff without fully checking it out. But I think it is probably safe to say that there have been meetings with outriders, various representatives, and perhaps they've been discussing some kind of future plan in which they might be able to work together. But the thing about Rupert Lowe is it's all on his terms. He, as you can see from that supposed offer he made, he knows that the conditions that he put there are completely unrealistic. Nigel's not going to sack Robert Jenrick or Suella Braverman in order to work with Restore. It's just not going to happen. I actually understand why Rupert would want that to be a condition, because a lot of people raised eyebrows at bringing in senior Tory figures who were so closely associated with the betrayals of 14 years. But it isn't going to happen. They are huge assets to reform. And Rupert Lowe knows it's not going to happen. And, to be fair on him, his publicity stunt, and that's what this is worked quite well. He's had a load of airtime. We're talking about it now. And people will have different views. But my view is this isn't going to happen, and it comes from a pretty informed position.
Yeah, I agree completely. It isn't going to happen. Just a word on reform. They've got a sort of another layer of policy to immigration, talking about bringing in the Royal Navy. They are looking at this sort of Ceuta-style invasion as being a bit of a warning shot as to what can happen when countries are rudderless and borderless, and the Navy could be the answer.
Well, of course we can stop the boats. I just find it extraordinary when people jump up and down and say it's all too difficult. The French stop the boats when it suits them, but only when it suits them. Now, if the French can stop the boats when it suits them, then one of the many things that we can do is make it suit them more often. And we don't make it suit them more often by continuing to chuck hundreds of millions of pounds their way for them to pick and choose when they bother intervening. If it were me in charge, I'd be going to war with them on a tariff front, just as Trump does. I would be putting enormous pressure on the French to do what they already do occasionally when they can be bothered, and that is to stop the boats.
And it should be that simple, and I really believe it is. Yeah,
no, it should be that simple, but also, if they won't, then of course we can.
Of course.
What is the point of the Navy? What is the point of the Navy if it isn't to protect our borders 100%. And protect our waters? And this isn't some kind of far-off thing. We're not trying to protect Easter Island at this point. We're talking about the Channel, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. It's not that difficult for our Navy.
Isabel, thank you as ever. Good to see you again. Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. Peter Barnes with us in just a couple of moments as well. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. This is Talk. Ian Collins in for Jezza for the next couple of weeks. I'm just sticking my headphones in. I had a little bit of a moment there. Oh. This comes from George in Corby. He says, morning, if Rupert Lowe is sincere about doing what is best for the country, then he should dissolve the Restore Party. I mean, that would be the natural thing, wouldn't it, if it was about doing something now, unless he's talking about assistance post-general election. I do wonder whether, I think Isabel is probably on the money on this stuff, that this is not going to go anywhere. It's a bit stunty. It will keep Rupert Lowe and Restore in the headlines. They are making some inroads. Don't underestimate that. They could be a pain in the backside of not just reform, but to a smaller degree to Tories as well. It all sort of feeds into it, but I don't sense this is going anywhere. Peter Barnes, political strategist, is also with us. Morning to you, Peter.
Good morning, Ian. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Here's a story then we didn't see coming this time last week, but over the weekend, Rupert Lowe released his video. It's worth having another listen to this before we speak. Here he is, accompanied by a piano, curiously, not quite sure why, in a very opulent setting. One would assume it's one of his many homes. Rupert Lowe and his message to Nigel Farage.
So, Nigel, my message is simple. If you are prepared to work together around serious policies, serious reform, and serious government, then so are we. Not because it's politically convenient for Restore Britain, not because it's personally easy, but millions and millions of British people deserve a patriotic government that puts our national interest before any personal differences that you and I may have.
So there it is. We just wish the camera had zoomed out a little bit so we could see the pianist and maybe Claudia Winkleman crying next to him or something. I don't know, whatever was going on there. Maybe they were doing
everybody in a cloak.
Indeed, yes, in a cloak. That would be quite telling, wouldn't it? So what are you making of this then? I mean, it's kind of, to some people, mixed messages we're getting here. Some people going, this is not a story, really, because it's not going to happen. But it kind of is a story because it throws up the kind of position of the right. And I would even include the Conservatives in this.
Oh, yeah, this is definitely a story. Now, I agree that I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think we're looking at the price tag for Reform UK, and it's definitely more Harrods than Primark, put it that way, in terms of what they'd have to kind of accept. This is a full-scale acceptance of some of the harder policies of Restore Britain that a lot of people in the public do actually support. I was listening to Isabel then. I do think she's right on many of these issues. I think the public are willing to at least have the conversation. My problem with the things like the death penalty referendum is you would end up having the death penalty referendum as your general election policy. And considering the fact that that is a 50 to 45% in favour, that's a 5% gap. That's too tight of an issue to be wandering around in a general election that's going to be this close. The one thing I will say is, isn't it funny how we've gone from Rupert Lowe and Little Rupert to Rupert Lowe now dictating the terms of the right of the political spectrum?
Yes.
Because that's what he's doing now. I mean, that is a phenomenal rise in power and stance, and it shows that Restore Britain isn't going anywhere. And the one thing I will say, I thought Isabel was actually a little bit wrong in what she said. Restore don't need to find thousands of candidates. They need 50 or 100 at the next general election. They stand in Tory reform marginals. That is a deal. That's a spoiler. They don't need to win power to have power. That's the big thing we have to understand. In the next general election, we're looking at what's going to be probably a coalition style, no matter who wins. So if you get 1 or 2 seats at the table, you're in it. But also, if you keep people away from the table, you also have that power. So I do think, actually, if Restore just find 50 candidates, flood them full of all the resources that they've got and actually make an effort on it, that could take away a majority from Reform very easily. So again, that is the threat. That's the position of strength Rupert Lowe is actually coming from. It's not that they're going to win, it's that they can stop other people winning.
Yeah. What do you make of this, and Isabel touched on it, this kind of Well, let's call it a conversation that is apparently happening between Rupert Lowe and the Conservatives. Now, I've heard this for about the last year or so, that there is something going on there. There's a lot of that makes no sense whatsoever to me. But then there's a little bit of me that could see why, well, maybe it could, you know, if Rupert Lowe can hurt Nigel Farage and Reform, he will do whatever it takes. What's your assessment of that? What at the moment is really a bit of a rumour?
Yeah, well, I think there's a bit more than a rumour. I will admit that I've heard the same things probably Isabel has, and, you know, it's not right to say without proof. But I think the way to think about it is think of the Houthis and the Iranian regime. That, in other words, that they are... some people in the Tories think that they can use Restore to attack Reform without the Tories having to attack Reform, because they, you know, obviously the Tories have got the 14 years of baggage, so therefore they're open to attack very easily. If you keep having Rupert Lowe around, you can use them as a weapon against Reform. That's maybe some of the thinking. Now, whether it works is all rather here to there, because fundamentally, even if the right unites, when you add up all of the electoral votes for the last two by-elections and the mayoral election, the right still loses. It's not that the right needs to get together and we magically win elections. It's actually the fact that the right isn't convincing the public that they are credible enough to govern the country. That's the real issue on the table. It's nothing to do with the fact that we all can't get along with each other. We're Tories and, you know, and Reformers and Restore. We're not supposed to get along. It's what we're very famous for. But what I will say is we have to be more credible. That means that when it comes to policy, it's detail. It's not headlines. It's how are we actually going to do something? And until the right learns that lesson, you can have all the agreements you like, but they're never getting back into power.
So you don't imagine it's going to be something like, I don't know, 6 months before the next general election, if we have that sort of notice, that Rupert Lowe suddenly comes out and says, look, I've looked at everything, I've given it a good go, I feel very passionately about this, that and the other, but frankly, the only party my supporters should vote for now is the Conservatives?
I don't see that. If I'm being honest, I don't see any kind of formal agreements like that before the election. You might get some kind of backroom dealing. In other words, don't stand this candidate here and we'll not put that much resources there. You might get those kind of non-aggression pacts, but I don't see any kind of formal policy agreements or anything of the sort realistically happening before the election, particularly when we don't even know if there's going to be one. So, again, a lot of it is kind of circumspect, but again, we are talking about the fact that Rupert Lowe is dictating the terms to Nigel Farage and Reform, who are on the down. Let's be real. The fact that Reform aren't driving the agenda anymore is very significant, not just on the right, but in British politics in general. Andy Burnham has rather boxed Nigel Farage in, and then he's got all his own problems going on, and as are other people in Reform, because I watched Richard Tice this morning, and I thought he was going to serve me some maple syrup. There was that much waffle coming out of his mouth. So they don't seem to have many kind of coherent strands to pull on now, which is why I think you've got this Operation Fortress announcement at about 11 o'clock.
Well, it's going to be interesting, isn't it, what happens at 11 o'clock? But going forward on this one, are we still in a territory where, at the moment, according to the polls, Andy Burnham would win a general election? But if you put the Conservatives and Reform together in some form, now it probably wouldn't happen before an election, then they could form a government. Where would if you were going down to the bookmakers right now on this one, Peter, where would your money be?
I would go Tory Reform coalition, but the Conservatives being the largest party at the moment, purely because Reform are in freefall. I think this, the Christopher Harborne issue, and not to mention other issues surrounding finance, has absolutely crippled the credibility and the electability of Reform UK. I think that is being wildly underestimated by a lot of people. I mean, when 72% of people think that Farage is sleazy and 69% think the party itself is also sleazy, they have a bigger problem than a lot of people are willing to admit.
They're still beating the Conservatives, and they're still almost on the heels of Labour. So even though they've taken a slight dip, it's not much.
Yeah, it might not be much, but if we look at where they were about 14 months ago, they were at 34% with a working majority. They were miles ahead. Now, in less than a year, we're talking about everybody being in touching distance. That is not the definition of a party in forward motion.
On that point, Peter Barnes, thank you as ever. We'll speak soon, Pete. That's Peter Barnes, political strategist, with us on the programme. Thank you to him. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. Lots more to get through, loads more comment. Julia Hartley-Brewer on the way too. We'll chat to her before the news to find out what is going on in her programme. Coming up, or in fact, it's almost bang on 10 to 10. This is Talk.
49,000 people are leaving Morocco because apparently it's war-torn. But Jet2 this morning are offering 20% off a trip to Morocco for a week. Which country in Europe wipes everybody else's backside but its own people? Here.
This is a huge football story, folks. UEFA has now said no European nation will participate in any FIFA competition so long as proposals to create a company to run the World Cup remain alive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. Morning, 0344 499 1000. Andy from Cheddar says, what is more important, Zia's relationship with Rupert or saving our great country? When the politicians can finally figure out what the people are far more important than the party, then perhaps we can get with the job, actually saving this once great place and making it great again. The difficulty is, and I don't mean this in any kind of, like, you know, I've got some secret in on this, but you really cannot. I mean, I promise you, you can. It is interesting when somebody earlier on Twitter said, oh, we don't listen to people like Trevor Kavanagh and the likes of that, Isabel, whoever, journalists, people, what their opinions count. Well, you know, these are mostly informed people. I can tell you that I've spent many years at the Press Gallery in Westminster, haven't done it for many years, but doing this job, you do get to know some of the central players. You get to know them very well indeed. You get to know them to the point you can go for a drink or a meal with some of them. And I say that purely to inform this next point, which is that the chasm of jip, hassle and history between Reform and Rupert Lowe is so big, it is so big, it would be extraordinary if you could build that bridge. It would be extraordinary. Now, being extraordinary doesn't mean it's not possible. I'm not suggesting that anything is possible. But it would be extraordinary if you could somehow put those relationships back together. And the idea that you could just go, but it's for the country, and you could sit down and have Rupert Lowe and Zia Youssef sitting next to each other, carving out policy into the small hours, ain't going to happen. That bit ain't going to happen. So something would have to give to make this happen, and that would be substantial in itself. Let's go to Lorraine in East London. Lorraine, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Oh, hello, good afternoon.
Hi. Morning, rather.
Good morning, yeah. The thing is, to unite the right is the only way forward. I'm speaking for myself. I live in East London, Tower Hamlet. I've lived here all my life.
When you say the right, are you talking about Restore and Reform or the Conservatives as well?
No, I'm talking about all the parties. Like Restore, Reform, even a little bit the Conservatives. We have to unite. United we stand, divided we fall. And this is our only last chance hotel to get our foot in the door.
Okay.
And everybody I know, and I know a lot of people, I've lived here all my life, and most of my friends grew up with, whatever, they're all saying the same thing. And I think that they should, I'm a Reform member, so I think they should get over their schoolyard scuffles and egos, just join up for the sake of the country, because it's the only chance we're going to have.
Well, I think some can join up. Many of some of those, if there was some kind of pact, is likely to happen after an election, and that would be if Reform became the largest party, but not enough to form a government, then they would have no choice. But, of course, that would mean getting embedded with the Conservatives, unless there happened to be a proliferation of Restore MPs. We will see. Listen, Lorraine, thank you for that. I hear the story. I hear what you say replicated right across the country on a daily basis. John is in France. Hello, John. Morning to you.
Good morning. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good as gold at this end. What's going on? What have you got for us?
Your football team are going downhill.
We haven't started yet.
£10 million fine, no transfer.
10 million quid? I mean, it's pocket money to these boys. A big old boardroom.
Getting over the time we beat you at Loftus Road 6-0.
Yeah, that was about 1971.
It wasn't. Anyway, it wasn't. It wasn't.
I believe
the thing that hasn't been factored in here is Islamist terror attacks.
Go on.
Well, they're coming. Simple as that. They won't be all. They can't all be stopped. They will all. There'll be another Manchester or something along those lines where these people will kill the likes of us. That hasn't been factored into.
So you're sensing there is, and are you saying this is directly linked to channel migration?
Of course it is. They're all talking about Iranians coming across.
Yeah. There's a big issue around that. Of course there is, and for some strange reason, someone's decided not to stop it.
What everybody wants to ask is, why do our socialist want these people here? Why? What possible good is all of this immigration doing for Great Britain? Why do they want them here? I don't understand it. Why do you want 10 blokes in HMO in the street in Bolton whose only thing they can do is drive taxis or work in a tobacco shop?
I hear you. Listen, John, your phone line, sadly, is sort of slightly got the better of us. But thank you, John. Your broad point is made. John in France. We've only got 30 seconds, Laura Jane in Hampshire, but I'm sure you can do it for us. What would you like to say?
I can. Isabel, I bow to her knowledge. Obviously, she has the inside thread on this. But I believe that we can do it if Ben Habib was the umpire in between those two. If we really put our shoulder to the wheel, reconciliation isn't really the word I would use, as Grace did earlier. But I feel very strongly that I have been really wanting this to happen. I know my 30 seconds are up, but honestly, please, Ben, go in there and be the umpire.
Got it. Laura Jane, succinct stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Julie Hartley-Brewer just walked in. You know what was strange when you walked in there?
We've got to be succinct.
I just be succinct. When you walked in, I actually sat up like a school teacher had walked in the room.
Quite right, Julie.
I was one step away from standing up, frankly. Like it was back in the day, apparently.
Did you have to do that at school?
No, but you know what our teacher did do? Our teacher told us a story this was in primary school, of how they used to do the standing up. So they brought it back in. This one
Fair
teacher.
enough.
Yeah, not for the school,
Just
just one teacher.
Just for you, made you stand in the corner looking at the
It was just
wall.
me. I quite liked it, actually. A bit of respect. Yes. Always had one of those.
Right, we're going to start doing this for Ian when he walks in the morning.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Everybody rise.
Yeah, anyway, as always, been away. Not much going on.
No, that's right. Whenever Hartley-Brewer goes on holiday, big stories.
This is genuinely 9/11.
Slight invasion of Spain.
It's not mainland Europe. I mean, that was just extraordinary. It's still ongoing. They haven't all gone home.
No, they haven't all gone
Our
home.
channel boats, 2,000 under Burnham, but don't worry, Burnham's going to be relentless. He's going to be relentless. So it's all
Don't
solved.
be so cynical.
It's all solved.
He went to Dover, Julia.
He wore a suit and everything.
A suit to Dover.
It's all solved.
In 30 degrees heat.
Nigel Farage has got a plan. So has Rupert Lowe. We're going to be discussing all of that. Quite a lot going on.
Yeah, but they've got these plans. I mean,
I've seen all your interviews this morning, and it's just like, they're all kind of skirting around each other.
I mean, you know as well as I was saying, I wasn't giving anything away there, but the arguments between some of these people are so big, you cannot imagine. And personal. You cannot imagine them sitting around having a coffee and an after eight.